Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, which is the 21st of July 2021. And we're here to hear the business before us. And my name is Councillor Judes Butt, and I'm the chair of the Licensing Committee and considered the presiding person at the meeting this morning. So I therefore ask for a nomination for chair of this subcommittee, please.
Chair, I'm happy to nominate you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And may I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to nominate you, Chair, Councillor Andy Hadley.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. So we'll now continue with the meeting and we'll start with housekeeping, and I'll ask my clerk, please, Mrs. Cutler, to help us with our housekeeping. Thank you, Mrs. Cutler.
Good morning. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, up to the exclusion of public and press, which we don't have this morning, is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the chairman will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right of the screen. Finally, please can you ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Just give you a few moments just to check your phones. Thank you very much, Mrs. Cutler. So apologies. We do in fact have an apology today, and it's our second reserve, Councillor David Kelsey, who is indisposed this morning. So if we could notice apologies. Move on now to declarations of interest, and I'll ask the subcommittee members in turn if they have any declarations of interest. Councillor Hadley, any declarations of interest, please?
No, none, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, any declarations of interest?
None, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I have no declarations of interest for completeness. Thank you very much. We move on to the protocol of public speaking at item 4, and this is a revised protocol with regard to virtual meetings, and it's been circulated with the agenda sheet at item 4. We now move on to our substantive, which is 137 Red Hill Drive, Bournemouth. And an application has been received for a new premises licence for the premises known as 137 Red Hill Drive, Bournemouth. This matter is brought before the Licensing Committee for its determination this morning. So I'm going to ask each participant to introduce themselves, please. And could I ask ward members to raise their wards as well, so people are aware of the area that they cover? Thank you. I'll start with myself. My name is Councillor Judes Butt. I'm chairman of the Licensing Committee. I'm chairman of the subcommittee for the purposes of the hearing this morning. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Councillor Hadley.
My name's Councillor Andy Hadley. I'm a ward councillor for Poole Town Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. And Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, ward member for Alderney and Bourne Valley and member of the Licensing Committee. Thank you. Thank
you very much. And at this juncture, I'd like to thank Councillor Laurie Williams, and I'd like to introduce him, please, as our reserve this morning. Councillor Williams.
Yes, hello. I'm Lawrence Williams, councillor for Littledown and Iford.
And Councillor Williams, you're with us here as our reserve in case there's a need of you for the second item. I would ask, please, that you do stay local, and if you are needed for the second item, then our clerk, Mrs. Coulter, will contact you. Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I hope you can stay cool until you may be needed. Thank you very much. Moving on then, Sarah Rogers.
Hello, good morning. Yes, Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer, BCP Council.
Thank you very much. And we have Hannah Skelsey, Hannah. Would you like to introduce yourself, Hannah?
Hello, yes, I'm Hannah Skelsey and I am the owner of 137 Red Hill Drive.
Thank you, Hannah. And we don't have Councillor Jackie Edwards with us because unfortunately she's indisposed this morning. So we accept her apologies for not being able to attend. Linda Cole.
Good morning, I'm Linda Cole.
Oh, Mrs. Cole, we can hardly hear you.
Sorry.
That's better.
I'm sorry. It's Linda Cole. I'm the legal advisor to the subcommittee today.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Cutler.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Cutler and I'm your clerk for today.
Thank you very much, everybody. So in addition, we've got some democratic services officers in the background, making sure that we stay live with technical support, but they won't be taking any part in the meeting. So just before we start to run through the procedure, can I just clarify, please, that everybody who's given notice of their intention to speak has been identified. We don't actually have any speakers, but we do have a submission from Councillor Edwards, and anybody who wishes to withdraw representation or wishes not to speak has been identified. I don't believe there is anybody because we have our applicant and you've already advised us that you wish to speak. So if there are no other comments, I will move on. So I'm going to now explain the proposed procedure and order of speaking for our hearing this morning. And it's as follows. Our licensing officer will present the report. The applicant will then make their application. Questions of the applicant by all party and members of the committee will go first. Then we have responsible authorities and other persons will make their representations. We have none today. Questions of the responsible authorities and other persons, members of the committee, will go first, but we have no questions because we have no other persons. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is today. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And at the time, we will ask our legal advisor if she will give advice with regard to that right of appeal when we come to that juncture. I will now ask parties if they would confirm agreement to the proposed procedure, or if they're not agreed, to make the representation. So Sarah Rogers, are you content?
Yes, happy, thank you.
Thank you. Hannah Kelsey, are you content?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay, Hannah, thank you. And Linda Cole, are you content?
I am chair, yes.
Thank you very much. So we now finally just like to remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations, and all questions will be asked through the chairman, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. So I'll now ask our licensing officer to present her report. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. This application is for the grant of a premises licence for a residential premises, which proposes to operate as a cocktail making business, which will require the provision of the delivery of off sales of alcohol between the hours of 11 AM and 11 PM each day of the week. As a result of the consultation, a representation was received from Ward Councillor Edwards on the grounds that to grant the application would undermine the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm licensing objectives. Dorset Police have agreed 7 conditions with the applicant during the course of mediation. These conditions also dealt with concerns highlighted by public health and trading standards. Therefore, no formal representation was received from them, nor indeed any of the other responsible authorities. Should this application be granted and the applicant fails to operate in accordance with the licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Could I ask, please, are there any questions on points of fact from anybody? Members, Councillor Hadley? You're on mute, Councillor Hadley.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. And Councillor Johnson?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on points of fact with regard to the report from you, Hannah?
No.
OK, thank you very much. So, Hannah, it's your opportunity now for you as the applicant to put forward your application. OK, thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to highlight the concerns that Councillor Jackie Edwards did raise. So I won't be having people coming to collect anything to the house. I will be having a handful of delivery drivers coming to deliver the goods to people's addresses. I did work with Dorset Police and we did come to the conclusion that I can't do it towards park anything, which was what I had intention anyway. So only residential houses or business addresses will only be allowed to order the cocktails and be delivered to. So I will not be having deliveries for stock delivered to the address. I will go and pick the stock up myself to prevent any stock deliveries coming and going, because I wouldn't want that for the area. And also for the protection of children, I've done a course, and I have been put forward for another one, no drink, no sale. So I will be doing that as well to make sure that everyone will be ID'd upon purchasing the alcohol, and I will be making sure that the delivery drivers are aware that ID needs to be seen, and if it isn't, then they can't have the alcohol at all. And I think that was everything I wanted to cover additionally on what the application is already.
Okay, thank you. We'll allow you time to come back perhaps a bit later, Hannah, if something crosses your mind, because it's a little awkward because Councillor Edwards isn't here. So it's difficult for you to answer questions she's not able to raise. So we'll try and raise those on her behalf, and then hopefully you'll be able to answer them for us. OK, you happy with that? OK, yeah. Lovely. OK, so members, do we have any questions for Hannah? Bearing in mind that Councillor Edwards can't be with us, and hopefully we can tease out some of her issues. I'll come to you first, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Hannah, if you could just give us a little bit more information regarding the people who are involved. Are these associates of yours that you know personally? Is it a service that's already set up that you will be then using on a contractual basis, or is it something you're setting up yourself? If we could just have a little bit more information as to that, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you'd like to answer that, if you come through me, I'll then ask you to answer the question. OK, thank you, Hannah, if you'd like to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll be using my family members to do deliveries, and also I will be using the delivery service Uber Eats, which also have the drivers that are aware about the ID upon delivering.
OK, they're contractually required to have that requirement, so they act in that way. That's for that. Councillor Johnson, any other questions at this time?
Just if there is a particular idea of how you're going to split that work, will Uber Eats be doing most of it and then topped up by your family members on particularly busy days, or is it going to be a more even split of the work?
Thank you, Hannah. If you'd like to answer. Yes. So primarily it will be me and my family members. However, because I work 5 days a week, and if it's inconvenient for me to do the delivery, I will then suggest the Uber Eats route.
Okay. Are you content with that answer, Councillor Johnson? Did we want to tease out a little as to how Uber Eats are actually being utilised, whether it's on a contractual basis or just as any other customer might use them, perhaps?
Exactly as you say. Exactly as you say. Just to work out your relationship with Uber Eats, is it available to just be activated on a day-to-day basis? Or do they require advance notice of when they will be needed for your business?
Thank you, Hannah.
So I haven't spoken to Uber Eats, so I don't know what the grounds are as of yet. However, I will be making sure that my family will be the first protocol to doing the deliveries. So I will be setting up a meeting if all goes okay with the hearing today, and making sure the plans are put in place that the primary delivery people will be my family.
OK, thank you for that. You've been very clear. Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson. I'm sorry, Councillor Hadley. You're on mute, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I was just finding the mouse. Yeah, just in terms of obviously it's great having your family around you and supporting you in this venture, but in terms of training and dealing with the public who may actually not be very happy about being refused service, what sort of training do you think what are you hoping to cover that in sort of some training? Is it to make sure that they do the ID checks and that they're comfortable getting into those situations, the conflict resolution, those sorts of things?
Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, so I will be making sure that everyone that is doing the delivery will have to do the Challenge 25 and then the no sale course that I think Sarah sent me, or someone from the licensing sent me, and to make sure that everyone is doing and completing the courses and making sure that we're all on the same page, that unfortunately, if there's no ID, there's no sale, and with my family having that training, I think we'll all be on the same page.
Okay, Hannah, and you're aware that that's a police condition with regard to challenge 25, and that obviously operation isn't possible until that condition is complied with, so training would need to be put in place. Thank you. Councillor Hadley, any other question? Yes,
I guess it was Councillor Jackie Edwards' concerns about it being a residential area, and you referred to that a little earlier with the school behind you, and you also said you were working, so I'm not sure that the hours are 11 to 11, but actually, will you actually serve? Is the intention to be serving throughout the day? And I'm particularly worried about the evening school period in terms of congestion and impact on children of having deliveries coming to and from your premises.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, so I have done the 11 AM to 11 PM to allow me flexibility. So if I was to have a delivery in advance, I would be able to arrange that. However, my primary window will be 6 till 10 Friday and Saturday. So I will not be working throughout that whole time that I have asked for. It's just so I have that flexibility. So I will not be working throughout that whole period. It will primarily just be Friday and Saturday, 6 till 10, just so it doesn't disturb the buses or the school traffic. And if I was to get a one-off order at midday on a Monday or something, I would be able to set that up just so I have that, rather than I'm not breaking any laws with not selling in my period or anything like that.
Yes, understood. It's you're trying to cover a wide gamut, but your specific work period which you intend to is a shorter space of 6 to 10 in general. I think, yeah. Are you content with that, Councillor Hadley? Content with the information within the answer?
Thank you. Yes, that's helpful.
Okay. I have quite a few questions for you, Hannah, with regard to satisfying Councillor Edwards' concerns. So bear with me. You understand that you've already got the police conditions, and you clearly understand what they are. You've iterated those to us, and also the trading standards. They're not conditions, but there were issues in there which were raised, and you've encompassed them within your offer, and you're aware that they are no customers who are drinking on the premise, only for the making of the cocktails. People are only there for the making of the cocktails. The purchase of alcohol will be limited per household on orders to prevent binge drinking. Now, that was a concern. The committee were uncertain as to how you might make that work. So the purchase of alcohol will be limited per household on orders to prevent binge drinking. How do you intend to do that?
So as I will be the person making the cocktails and controlling the whole functions of people ordering and things like that, I'll make sure that there are only a certain amount of orders coming through, and then if there are too many, I will go back to the person in the household and advise that they've reached their maximum limit, and then I will issue a refund if necessary.
So that said, which sounds very sensible, do you intend to set a maximum limit and make that quite clear to your customers as to what that is, so they have an understanding of the offer you're providing?
Yes, so I will be advertising on social media, which is the platforms that I will be using to sell the alcohol, with advertising, making sure that everyone is aware that there is a limit, which will be 3 orders per household, and you can't exceed that at all. That unfortunately that just won't happen. It won't be delivered anymore.
Okay, thank you for that assurance. Now, with regard to one of the questions that was raised from Councillor Edwards, she said that are there measures in place to ensure that it's not fake or tampered alcohol? Now, obviously, this comes under strict trading standards, and you have a good relationship with them and understand that it's important that this area is made sure that you're not actually providing alcohol which is too strong it's within the trading standards requirements, yes. And people are also having concerns, or Councillor Edwards does, with the storage of large amounts of alcohol on the premises. So there's always, word gets around quickly, you're doing cocktails and you'll have a lot of alcohol. People might know this and therefore they might want to come along and remove that alcohol from you. So how do you intend to store that safely so that it can't be removed from your premises?
So I am storing it in the utility room, and it does have a lock on the door, which I will be the designated supervisor of the property, so I will be the only one with the key. Yeah. Just to make aware as well, if I'm honest, I'm not planning for it to be really busy, and if it does pick up, I will think about moving quite sharply because I don't want that nuisance brought to the area. This is just from where I'm trying to start it and get enough money behind me to go elsewhere, so I don't disturb. I don't think it's going to disturb the area anyway, but I don't want to upset people long term.
Okay, yes, that sounds very sensible. I just wanted to ask, you obviously the preparation of cocktails, you won't be doing this within view of the school. In fact, the preparation of cocktails will be where on the premise?
I did send a floor plan. I'm not sure.
We did see it. Yes, we've got it. We've got the floor plan.
So it is in the utility room in the kitchen, and it is an enclosed room with a really tiny window that the school can't see. And just to highlight as well, I'm not directly backing onto the school. There is a neighbouring house and garden in between me and the school, and we do have quite a lot of wildlife and trees, and so they can't actually see into the property.
Okay, yes. So the preparation of the cocktails is out of view of minors, which is obviously a concern. Now, one of the other concerns, although traffic is not necessarily a licensing committee remit, if it impacts upon the licensing objectives, then it is. Now, we notice outside your premise, we go to the map, please, if we can, members, that you have some zigzags and some white markings and I believe yellow lines directly in front of your property. Now you spoke, I think your phrase was a handful of deliverers. Do you expect a handful to arrive all at the same time if you have 10 cocktails to go out to different addresses, or is it a case of one person will be delivering those? So how do you intend to handle the coming and goings of your deliverers given your setting of where you are in your property?
Yes, so my drive is capable for 3 large cars, and it's got a drop down curve so they can come onto my driveway. Alternatively, you do have Red Hill Drive where you've got the facility of parking that isn't on the zigzag. I will not tolerate any delivery driver parking on the zigzag or the double yellow lines. That's absolutely not going to happen, and I'm going to make sure that they use the facilities of my driveway and of the road that you can legally park on. But I don't expect 10 delivery drivers. I'm keeping it very small. This is a small business, and if it does rapidly grow, then it will change venues immediately.
Yes, that we understand that. So what is your thought process with regard to how many drivers you would expect at any one time with regard to your fledgling business as you're starting out now in this property?
1 or 2. I'm honestly not expecting it to be busy at all.
Okay, right. Well, that's very helpful to members. Thank you very much, Hannah. I'll come back to the members. Councillor Hadley, do you have any further questions based on the debate?
No, thank you, Chair. That was
okay, thank you. And Councillor Johnson, anything for clarification or further questions based on the debate?
No, thank you, Chair. You've covered it all.
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah, for your contributions. Very helpful indeed. So we've had our questions. I will just ask if our licensing officer, Sarah Rogers, has. Sarah?
Yeah, it was just one, and
Thank you.
The limit of 3 orders per household. Is there a limit on how many cocktails consist of one order?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Hannah.
It's 4. Just to highlight as well, it's 1 shot per drink.
Right. So 4 cocktails per order, and it's a 1-shot cocktail.
It is, yes.
Okay, that's extremely helpful. Thank you. Are you content, Sarah? Are there any other questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising that. Okay, so we don't have any other persons because unfortunately Councillor Edwards can't be with us, but I believe that the subcommittee have teased out her questions and clarified them with you. So we now have an opportunity for summary, and this basically is you, Hannah. So you've now got an opportunity to summarise on your application and tell us anything that you would like us to listen to with regard to how you are going to provide for this service of which you're applying for. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. So I think I've covered it all with the questions that have been asked, but I just want to clarify that I will be minimising any nuisance to the property, and the protection of children will be the first priority for me, because I don't want any harm to anyone at all, and this is just the location to start my business, and then I will be expanding to different properties once I have the income to pay for the additional property, and then once that happens, then no consumption of the making of the drinks will be made at this property.
I understand. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that, Hannah. Sarah, did you want to have the last word? You always get that, and anything further you'd like to add?
No, nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much, Hannah. A bit of a baptism of fire there, coming in and being the only one on the stage, so to speak. Thank you so much for your contributions, extremely helpful. So we'll now conclude the hearing, and at the end of this meeting, the subcommittee will adjourn in private with our legal advisor and our clock, and we'll deliberate. And because it's COVID regulations, although we're supposed to be COVID-free, notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, with the day or the last day in which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations. So that's today. So within 5 working days from today, Hannah, you'll be getting your outcome. Okay. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I will ask our legal advisor if she will advise you about that right of appeal. Thank you, Linda.
Yes, the decision that's made today, there will be a right of appeal to it. That appeal should be made to Dorset Magistrates Court within 21 days of the formal notification of today's decision. But all the detail will be set out in your decision letter. Read the appeal.
Thank you very much, Hannah. It is absolutely lovely to see somebody so young and so enthusiastic bringing something in front of us, and it's been a delight to speak to you this morning. So thank you so much for your application. Okay, so we will. Okay, thank you. So if you'd like to leave us, Hannah, and we'll be inviting our other applicants in for the next meeting. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay then, ladies and gents. Michelle, how are we? Thank you. And welcome back to the Licensing Subcommittee meeting of July 21st, 2021. And our next item on the agenda is the Boathouse 9 Key Road, Christchurch. Thus, an application has been received to vary the premises licence for the premises known as the Boathouse 9 Key Road, Christchurch. This matter is brought before the Licensing Committee for determination. So I'm going to ask each participant now to introduce themselves, and members, if you could advise us please of your ward. So I'll start with myself. My name is Councillor Jude Smart. I'm chairman of the Licensing Committee and I'm chairman of the subcommittee for the purposes of business today. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo in Poole. Councillor Hadley.
Hello, I'm Councillor Andy Hadley. I'm a ward councillor for Poole Town Ward and a member of the Licensing Committee. Thank
you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, ward member for Alderney and Bourne Valley and member of the Licensing Committee.
Okay. Now, we always have reserved members for these meetings in case somebody's indisposed, and our reserved member today was Councillor Williams. I don't think Councillor Williams is with us, but just to say, Councillor Williams, for the record, thank you so much for attending today to support us had you been needed. So moving on to Sarah Rogers, thank you.
Hello, good morning. Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer, BCP Council.
Okay, and Sandra Graham.
Good morning, Sandra Graham, solicitor at Trefowens, representing the applicant. I have Mr. Richard Slater with me, present in the same room. Mr. Kim Slater is joining separately.
Okay. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Terrible monocle. And our applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Slater. Thank you. Our applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Slater, are you with us?
Kim Slater here. Yes, I'm here. I'm not married to Richard. He's my right-hand man in the business.
Okay, so we've got Kim Slater and we've got Mr. Richard Slater, and who are you, sir?
Hi, I'm Richard Slater. I'm sat with Sandra at the moment, so you don't get to see my face. I'm one of the managers at the Boathouse and helping Kim out with operations from that side of things.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Slater. So we now have our objectors, Sarah King.
Hello. Yes, hello. Sarah King.
Hello, Sarah. Okay, moving on then to Ruth Dwyer and Adrian Dwyer.
Yes, we're here.
So, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Chairman, Councillors. I'm Daniel Lucas, Town Clerk of Christchurch Town Council. I'm a barrister by training, but I'm acting as the Town Clerk for Christchurch Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lucas. And Councillor Avril Coulton. Councillor Coulton, you're muted if you want to unmute. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm representing the residents as Priory Ward Councillor for Christchurch, and I'm also representing myself, my views and their views.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coulton. So yes, that's lovely. Thank you. So moving on to Linda Cole. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Linda Cole, the legal advisor.
Linda, your microphone. Yes, pop it down. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm Linda Cole, the legal advisor this morning for the subcommittee.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Cutler?
Good morning, I'm Michelle Cutler and I'm your clerk for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in addition, we have Democratic Services officers in the background and they're providing technical support to the meeting, but they take no part in the meeting. So just before I run through the meeting, may I check that with so many people putting through submissions, that all persons have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and we will allow the Dwyers in if they are able to join us at a later stage. And any person who wishes to withdraw representation or wishes not to speak has been identified and speaks now. Okay, I will take that as correct. So quickly explain the proposed procedure for our meeting this morning and the order of speaking, and that's the licensing officer will present the report, the applicant will make their application, questions for the applicant will be made by all parties and members of the committee of the subcommittee will go first. The responsible authorities and other persons will make the representations. It's no responsible authorities today, so it'll just be other persons. And questions of the other persons will then be put, and members of the committee subcommittee will go first. And then all parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude, and the subcommittee will deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days. This is due to the COVID requirements, the COVID rules, although hopefully we're supposed to be COVID free. And that's 5 working days beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, and that's today. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal. And we will be asking our legal advisor, Mrs. Cole, to advise us with regard to the right of appeal at the time. So I'll ask all parties again to confirm agreement that they are content with the proposed procedure or to make representations. So Sandra Graham, are you content?
Indeed, ma'am, thank you.
And Mr. and Mrs. Slater, are you content?
Yes.
And Sarah King?
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. and Mrs. Dwyer, are you content? Yes, okay. And Mr. and Mrs. Downing aren't with us yet. And Mr. Lucas, are you content?
Indeed, Madam Chairman, it seems very reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Coulton, are you content?
Yes.
And Sarah, are you content?
Yes, I am, thank you.
And Linda, are you content? Yes, Linda, are you happy? You are.
I am, yes.
So finally, please may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chairman, and there'll be no cross-examination of the parties. So I'll now ask our licensing officer to present the report. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. This application is for a variation of a premises licence at the Boathouse, which is a restaurant, cafe bar with bar facilities and a function space. It's situated within a public open space on Christchurch Quay. The premises are currently licensed from 10 AM until midnight, Monday to Saturday, and 11:30 PM on Sunday for on sales. During COVID, off sales were permitted until 11 PM each day of the week. However, condition 2.10 is now requested to be removed to enable the premises to continue to provide this facility. A minor variation was previously applied for to remove this condition. Due to the number of representations received at that time, which related to the licensing objectives, officers refused the application and advised if the applicant wished to pursue it, they must go through the full variation process. 20 representations to this full variation were subsequently received on the grounds that to grant the application would undermine all 4 licensing objectives. No representations were received from any of the responsible authorities. As always, should this application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with the licence and the conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you. You're on mute.
With regard to Sarah's presentation. Members, do you have any questions?
I have a couple, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just for clarity, Sarah, could you confirm that the refusal that you mentioned there was due to a procedural different the licensing objectives? You mentioned a refusal for the application for a variation of the license, but you said that it was a procedural thing rather than anything else.
Yeah, minor variation. There's no hearing, so it's delegated to officers which you refuse or grant. And due to the number of representations that came in, it was decided to refuse the application to be open and transparent if they wanted to pursue it through the full variation process and subsequent hearing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that question, Councillor Johnson. So are there any other questions from any other parties? No, okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to the applicant, and it's your opportunity to put forward your application. Thank you very much.
Good morning all. Perhaps I could just firstly apologise, and hopefully you'll accept the fact that I'm not formally wearing a jacket as I would in a formal hearing, but it is rather sweltering in this office this morning. The application is in effect, as Mrs. Rogers has just explained, to formulate the approval to sell off sales, which was granted temporarily during the COVID period, and which has actually been so welcomed by visitors and customers to these particular premises that the operator thought that it would be a very helpful thing to customers generally if it could be made permanent. And I'd say at the outset, just to clarify, that a minor variation application was made as on inquiry from your licensing team. It was suggested that this had become fairly standard practice as long as the hours were limited to 11 p.m. for those premises that had had a temporary consent along those lines during the COVID period. And as Mrs. Rogers quite rightly commented, that the minor variation procedure is a relatively new procedure wherein for small variations to premises, one is allowed to make an application without advertising the application in the press, and providing there are no objections or relatively few objections that can be dealt with, then the application can be granted. If there are any objections, then the minor variation procedure automatically falls out of the picture and one has to go for a full variation, which is where we're at the present time. And I have to say, it did come as a fair shock to me to see the objections to the minor variation that was submitted, as none of these were brought to our attention before the determination was made that the application be refused, and which thankfully your licensing office were very helpful and explained that it had been overlooked, that the person dealing with the matter had been off, and no objections had actually been relayed to us before that minor variation determination. So unfortunately, procedurally, there was nothing the applicant could do to assist before the minor variation was actually determined as refused.
Okay, well, Mrs. Graham, for that oversight. So regrettably, we are where we are, and we're here this morning to hear the full variation. So my apologies for that. Thank you very much for your application. You'll have an opportunity to come back at another stage, asking you some questions. So now we do have.
Sorry, Chair. That was part of my opening. I've nowhere near finished.
Please carry on. I mean, we get summations which are shorter than that, but if you wish to carry on, that would be absolutely excellent, and would give us some more advice and information. Thank you, Mrs. Graham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your apology. I was not seeking an apology so much as to set the background understanding so that you knew where we were at with this application. So hence, I'm afraid that when a full variation application was submitted, every trouble or issue on the Quamps area, and I'm assuming, councillors, that you're all familiar with the Quamps area in Christchurch, every issue that seems to have occurred on the Quamps, which is an area of public open space, seems to have been thrown at the door of these particular premises. The premises have been in the same hands, the same operator now since 1998. During which time the operator has made considerable improvements to the premises, and you'll see, I hope you've had some photographs circulated to you
That's a very good point. That's a very good point, Mrs. Graham. And again, a those, please.
Sorry, Chair, you dropped out for a bit there.
I'm sorry, yes, I'm having some, I live in the middle of nowhere, so I'm having a little difficulty with connection. OK, let's start again. Mrs. Graham has referred to some photographs, which we're all hopefully going to go and have a look at, and they were sent last night, well within time. So it's just to ask that people do have them and they can refer to them now if they so wish, because I believe that Mrs. Graham wants to take us through them. Thank you. Yes. I'll give everybody a moment just to find them, Mrs. Graham, if that's OK.
Okay.
Everybody content? They were sent via email, so it should be easy to access. OK, thank you, Mrs. Graham. If you want to continue.
So, Ma'am, without taking everyone through them in specific order, but I'm sure you will see from the earlier photographs of the premises as they now exist that they've been incredibly well presented and improved over the years. And you will see from the last photograph in the bundle that I happened to put in just so that you could get a feel of the improvements, that in 1998 the premises had been boarded up for some time. They were previously a pub for a short time, but I won't go into the details of what happened to that pub. But you will see from that last photograph the extent of the investment that the operator has put into these premises to ensure that the premises are well presented and provide a good quality service and a very pleasant atmosphere to those people attending the premises.
Thank you.
I would just add for clarification at this stage that the premises licence holder and operator is a company called Macemaid Limited. The director of Macemaid Limited is Mr. Kim Slater, who is on the remote meeting, and Mr. Richard Slater, who is with me this morning, is the general manager and operator of the premises.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, I had them both married off, which is a very dare ago of me. So thank you for that clarification, Mrs. Graham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure their partners would be glad to clarify that. So, Ma'am, you'll see that there is provision at the boathouse now for a very upmarket premises, very impressive food menu, and it attracts a huge range of clientele and particularly focuses on families and people who want to enjoy a decent meal at the premises. It is not the place where youngsters or those with antisocial behavior instincts or people who want cheap food and drinks would venture. It is just not that venue. The operator is most meticulous in the offering and very aware, in fact, of customer trends and demands, and is constantly improving and investing in the premises to assist with attracting the right clientele, if I can put it like that. During COVID, the operator took it upon himself to provide way above what was anticipated from any operator in the town, toilets for everybody, public as well, at the premises, together with a cleaner who was employed to hourly clean those toilets and sanitize the facilities so that everyone in the area could use toilets, given that some were locked, obviously, because of COVID provisions. And in addition, he, of his own back, arranged for litter collections for whatever litter was in the Quamps area, and around the premises. Everything was collected during that period at 2 times of day when the premises opened, and then another little walk round was undertaken at night at the end of the premises closing. Bear in mind, when I say closing, Ma'am, most of it was off sales during the COVID period. And when I say off sales, I don't just mean alcohol. A great majority of that was food and non-alcoholic drink, coffees, teas and the like. Indeed, we have had feedback from the police during this period. You'll note that there are no representations from them today saying how helpful that it was that there was an operator on site during this period who could add some supervision to the area, albeit he can't control the area, but at least his presence and the presence of staff may have tempered the actions of people, and he could oversee matters and call the police if there was any incident that was visible in the Quamps area. And I would add at this stage that obviously the Quamps is a public open space. It's an area where many events take place, and I understand that BCP Council themselves are actively promoting the bandstand area and the premises for events. So there's a lot of enjoyment for the public generally in this particular location. And I would venture to suggest that despite objections, it is intended that this land is open for the public generally, and not just for the residents of the area who are fortunate enough to live in such a lovely area. It is a public open space, and in that connection should be available and is intended to be available for picnics, for games, for sports, for music of anybody who wishes to enjoy that special area of Christchurch. The premises have been operating with the ability to sell off sales now for just over a year, and it has proved extremely popular. And there's been a number of requests from groups of people to continue this, despite 19th of July being Freedom Day, and hopefully we can get back to normal. There is a considerable amount of clientele, particularly the vulnerable or ladies in groups who have expressed a wish that despite the relaxation, that they still wish to be pretty cautious over their mixing with other people, and therefore have said they prefer still to enjoy drinks outside rather than come into the restaurant to partake of drinks. They can spread themselves out outside, keep away from other people and try and be extra cautious still. And the operator is aware that there is a sensitivity with a certain amount of the public who still want to be able to be extra cautious, shall I say, with COVID measures and maintain them. You'll see from the photographs that I've provided that the off sales and indeed the takeaway service generally is offered from a rather nice air-streamed caravan. For want of a better word, I'll probably be crucified calling it a caravan on site. And you will see from the photographs I've highlighted that there is a relatively limited food offering compared with the main restaurant. The main restaurant area is renowned for its high quality food on offer, but obviously high quality food comes at a price. And it's been noticed that since the takeaway offering has been introduced, that a considerable number of families who use the restaurant would prefer to use the takeaway because the offering, shall I say, is less expensive when you have perhaps 2 or 3 children in tow. who enjoy pizzas and are quite happy to have a pizza outside the restaurant. The ability to have a family meal but outside the restaurant has been an option that has been taken up by many families who have visited the premises. And in addition to that, it has been evidence that perhaps the father and the mother or the adults with them have asked for a glass of alcohol to be enjoyed with the pizzas, which is probably not surprising in this environment. So although it's popular, the alcoholic sales have not been a great proportion of what has been dispensed over the takeaway. And to give you some feel of the offering, the takeaway is open really from 11 midday up until mainly around 8 o'clock in the evening. And during that time, most of the food and drinks served have been coffees, teas, paninis, pizzas. And in terms of the proportion of alcoholic sales compared with the rest of the sales in the takeaway, then it's averaged out at about 10% of takeaway sales. So we're not talking about a massive off-sale outlet in the premises at all. And you'll also see from those photographs that there is an area of the premises that have been set aside with reinforced, well, it's reformed plastic seating and benches, which you'll see in the photographs I've provided, so that people can purchase the pizzas and the drinks and the like and sit on those tables with them, with the families. But some who enjoy picnicking still prefer to take them off site and sit on the quants and enjoy the food and drink that's offered.
Could I ask you to, we've had an awful lot of information, which is extremely useful, but I think we're probably about there. So if you'd just like to wrap up and then we'll move on to questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Very well. I would like to address you on the objections generally. I'm not going to obviously home in on specifics because we'll be here far too long. I'm sure you wouldn't wish me to do that. I would say that just continuing on the takeaway theme, that in terms of purchasing alcohol from the takeaway outlet, that orders for alcohol are electronically fed through to the main bar area of the premises. And at that point, the order is made up behind the bar of the premises and is brought out to those waiting by members of staff. There is no glass at all provided in any of the drinks that are ordered. It's all sustainable, recyclable waste that is used. So no glass bottles are dispensed with beer. The beer comes out in recyclable containers, and the alcohol is delivered by a member of staff, all of which have regular training in the licensing laws, and it's delivered to the people outside. And I would venture also to suggest that this would not be a premises that anyone looking to binge drink or youngsters would visit for alcohol. The price that the drinks are sold at, for example, is relatively high to discourage people who want to purchase lots of alcohol. And the average cost of a pint of beer is £6 to take away. This is deliberately priced to hopefully deter people who just want to binge drink and buy lots. If I may just turn to the representations and without going into detail, just refer to some of the points and deal with them in terms of matters that have raised themselves. Although there are complaints within the objections of glass and bottles in the quants, all litter has been collected by my clients throughout, but clearly none of the glass is part of their remit of litter whatsoever, although it is collected. The boathouse is not the only takeaway in the area. There is another takeaway which has been evidenced by the litter collected, polystyrene containers, for instance, and litter collected with marked packaging from different premises within the high street. So clearly, lots of people use the quants and this area and bring their own food, drink, or purchase it from elsewhere. And it is not the sole responsibility of my clients in terms of any litter that is deposited in that area. In terms of antisocial behaviour, it is acknowledged that there are groups of youths and with little other places to meet in Christchurch who do congregate on the far side of the quants, adjacent to the river, in a shelter that is there, or they group in gangs in the children's play area. The play area actually is some particular distance from the boathouse, and I did put in the photographs, one photograph of the quants from the riverside, and the play area is at the very far distant corner of that. There is a whole row of residential property between the boathouse and the children's play area. So groups of youth have always resorted to those areas, shall I say, and that has been going on for many years, according to the operator. And the fact that he has commercial property there, it's difficult to lay all these troubles at his feet. Bearing in mind that he has operated at the boathouse now for over 20 years, I would say that he and his staff are well aware of who these youngsters are. They would not obviously serve them, but their awareness of who they are perhaps does assist in supervising the area and any police issues when they arise. My client's premises are covered fully by CCTV, which obviously the police can use and assist with if need be on the quants. One particular representation states that the high prices at the boathouse may encourage people to bring their own cheaper alcohol, and this would exacerbate the problem. With the best will in the world, if my client is charging responsible prices for alcohol, he cannot prevent anyone of any age bringing alcohol from elsewhere or from the high street into a public open space. Nor can he help with objections such as launching fireworks on the quants, which could be attributable to anyone and anyone, and not the commercial operator who happens to be situated there. One of the most critical representations, which is number 6 in your list, I'm sorry, but I'm not aware of the names of the objectors, goes on to say that they themselves enjoy visiting the boathouse as customers, but are concerned for other people or what might potentially happen. Well, surely if you're happy to visit yourself as a customer, then you must accept that other people wish to do the same, and my client shouldn't be restricted by issues totally outside their control on a public open space. Equally, there are various complaints about using the quants, dare I say, as a toilet when the boathouse and other facilities are closed. But my client has done his utmost to provide facilities when the boathouse is open for anyone to use these toilets rather than to go on the quants. But obviously he can't justify keeping the toilets open 24 hours a day. They're only open whilst the premises are open. And I would just turn lastly to the Town Council's objection, which did come in later than within the time limits. I won't take any issue on this, but strangely, and I don't know why, the objection from the Town Council was emailed into a specific licensing officer who was not in the office during the relevant period. And I understand a bounce back message to that effect occurred, but it was not until long after the deadline, in fact last week, when I actually saw the Town Council's representation. And whilst I understand the Town Council's interest in the public open space, I would reiterate my comments on the other objections received, that these premises operate as a high-end responsible outlet, which I would suggest is beneficial to those in the area in terms of keeping an eye on what is going on the ponds. But the complaints that have been raised cannot surely be all landed at the foot of my client's premises when we're faced with a large open space at a time when COVID regulations have meant that when people are allowed to go outside and enjoy themselves, we've seen unprecedented amounts of people in areas where in normal circumstances this would not occur. And I would suggest that last year was a hiatus. It was not the norm, and hopefully we're now getting back to normal types of enjoyment and sensible congregations of people. And frame, I would just like to point you to the two photographs in the bundle on the penultimate pages, which were taken last weekend. And bear in mind, last weekend was a very hot weekend. Lots of people were out and about. And my client took some photographs of the state of the quants near on closing the premises on the Saturday evening, and again on the Sunday afternoon. And you will see that from those photographs, a surprising lesser number of people were on the quants than one would have expected. The car parks were full in the area, and I hopefully would venture to suggest that that is indicative that we're moving towards the norm going forward, and that now relaxation of COVID is hopefully on its way. Then the operation of the premises should be able to continue with this offering without any great issues from crowds on the pumps. And with that, Mum, I will close my explanation of the application and leave myself open for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gray. Certainly an expansive submission and covered, I think, every specific which has been raised with regard to the submissions. So I'll just move then to Mr. Kim Slater and Mr. Richard Slater. Was there anything that you wish to add as the applicants? Mr. Kim Slater?
Oh, hi, I'm here. I think Sandra's basically set out everything we wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kim Slater and Mr. Richard Slater.
Yeah, I again agree that Sandra has kind of detailed everything. I would just reiterate and draw your attention again to those final photos. Anybody that's on social media would have seen pictures, no doubt, of Bournemouth Beach all weekend with the heat wave, not to mention the front page of several newspapers. You can see the crowds that were in the area at that point in time, and yet the photos of the quay show that I think the Saturday evening at 7:30, which was just before we closed, we do not stay open late for the takeaway. You will see that it looks like a very pleasant evening on Christchurch Quay with families enjoying the space, but certainly not crowded. Again, the Sunday, where I think I remember Bournemouth Council issued over 1,000 parking tickets over the weekend to people parking all over the shot. You'll notice that again, Christchurch Quay just looks like a very nice, pleasant place where you can take your family and enjoy a bite to eat, some sunshine, and the pleasantness of the area itself. I don't feel that in any way we have detracted from that, and we've only added to the facilities on offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Slater. Thank you for those contributions. So it's now an opportunity for questions of the applicant by all parties. So I will start with the members, but members, as it's quite a complex application, I will allow you to come back at the end of all parties who've had the opportunity to raise a question, because there may be things that emanate from that. So I'll start with you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions at this time. At
this moment in time. Tease a few issues out first, understood. And Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have a plan. I'm familiar with the boathouse. I have been there and actually played crazy golf in my extremely long time ago in my youth behind it.
Too much information, Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, no, that's fine. In terms of the outdoor seating area, though, that it was possible to sit outside to eat from the restaurant, and I'm not clear how much of that area is for the restaurant and how much is for the takeaway facilities. I wonder whether Sandra or the applicant could give us a bit of information about that.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Graham, would you like to answer that, please?
It's Richard Slater here, if I can interject.
Okay.
So yeah, we have the outside area for the restaurant is still in existence. As you know, it's kind of the area that encroaches towards the crazy golf that you mentioned. We now have where we have situated the Airstream on the quay side there. We've just utilised that area to divide, so some of the seating on the front is available for the Airstream specifically, I suppose. Again, we don't regulate those tapes, so they are available for members of the public to sit on. We wouldn't throw somebody out if they were just choosing to sit there and have their own drink, whilst at the same time we do obviously have staff there that are monitoring it and keeping an eye on the area, as well as the managers that are on site have a constant overview of all the seating that is there. So we have a very controlled area available for people to use.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Councillor Hadley, are you content?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions at this time? I have a question for you, Mrs. Graham. Bear with me because I'm trying to work this one out myself. If the outside area was included in the current licence, then it would not need off sales. So if off sales are permitted, then it will include the premises outside area and alcohol being allowed away from the premises. So whether if granted, it will only be within the remit of the outside area or not. So could you expand on that, please, and explain? It's just a little, we're not quite grasping that. Thank you.
I think, Madam Chairman, that this is shall I say, a historic issue in that most premises licences nowadays have on and off sales generally. And if this was one of those licences, then we wouldn't be here today making the application. It would be within the licensed area, and we would naturally be allowed off sales with the on sales. But historically, when this license was granted, and I have to say I've been involved in these particular premises since 1985, so I note the comments that the council's data doesn't go back that far, but my memory does, and I've dealt with it quite a lot, is that historically this licence had specific conditions on that were agreed with Christchurch Council at the time, and those conditions prevented any off sales, which was unusual, but prevented that. And when the conversion of the premises licences occurred in 2005, I converted the licence, but at that time, because of the way we were operating at that time, a conversion was sufficient for the premises needs at that time. So we've never had off sales permanently throughout. and it was just the way the premises operated at that time. But obviously things evolve, demands, customer ways of dealing with things change, and it's become an expectation now that one could get off sales there like you could in any of the public houses on the high street or the immediate area of Christchurch. And it's just because the license was converted in that format, we've not actually changed it until now, because we've realised that it did work last year and that customers are asking for it to continue. So I hope that long-winded explanation.
Site of that converted licence, so we weren't able to ascertain as to where historically we were based. So that was a really helpful explanation. Thank you so much, Mrs. Graham. So moving on then to our objectors, and I'll take you in turn with regard to any questions you may have and with regard to Mrs. Graham's presentation. So I'll start with Mrs. King, Mrs. Sarah King. Thank you. Are you with us, Mrs. King? Do you have any questions for Mrs. Graham or Mr. and Mrs. Slater? Thank you.
Hi there. I respect you, the business, Boathouse as a business, and, and the application and how much you've improved the area and all of that. Just how much control, though, do you have in large groups of people saying they're going to meet at the Boathouse or on the Quamps? You can't actually manage when groups get bigger and bigger. Do you have control over that?
Well,
thank you, Mrs. Graham, if you'd like to answer. Thank you.
Mrs. King, we have control if they're visiting the Boathouse, because the staff simply do not allow large groups of people in the Boathouse, unless of course it's a celebration or say a 40th wedding anniversary booked or something like that. But if a large group of people just appeared at the door, then obviously an assessment would be made and they may well be turned away. But the premises can't control if a large group congregates on the Quamps, because that's not within the premises control at all. They can only control large groups if they are customers of the premises and within the immediate environment of the premises. I would just see if Mr. Slater, as General Manager, wants to add anything further to my comments. I'm just wondering if I could adjust my screen so that you could see Mr. Slater speaking and be rather than
there you are, Mr. Slater.
Hello there.
If you'd like to expand, that's perfectly acceptable. Thank you. And you're Mr. Richard Slater or Mr. Kim Slater?
Richard Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Slater. If you'd like to speak, thank you.
Certainly. I would say that, as Sandra has said, on the premises, we have always controlled group sizes. We have a distinct policy against booking large groups as a general. We kind of had a rule of 6 in our outdoor areas long before COVID ever came along. It's not the way we like to operate. We do have a function room that is available for hire, as Sandra says, for more mature functions. We do not do 18ths or 21st or anything along those lines up there. But if we get a lot of small weddings, shall we say, we cater for up to 50 people upstairs as a matter of course. As far as groups congregating on the quay, obviously we can't control large groups if they organise themselves to go down to the quay and use that area. However, we can control what we do as a company. And we found that during the first lockdown, when there was a very limited number of places open and operating in any level, that we did on occasion get congregations appearing when the weather was fine. If the group sizes outside got out of hand, we closed early. We did not take the opportunity to make money by selling anything we could. We looked at the situation, we decided that it was getting busier than we ever wanted it to be, and so we closed. That has not happened since that first lockdown. As soon as those first restrictions ended and all the other bars and clubs have been operating to some extent, pretty much throughout, we have not had any large groups appearing to use our takeaway. We are not drawing in large crowds. As Sandra said earlier, we are priced to the point that it does not attract those sort of groups of individuals. We are very much controlling the way we sell, who we sell to. We have, the Challenge 25 policy in place from the takeaway as well as from the main building. We are very much appealing to the mature or the family audience. We are not targeting the large groups of young revellers, as seems to be suggested by some of the complaints.
Thank you very much, Mr. Slater. Mrs. King, do you have any further questions?
All I would say is that by to the boathouse, it's at night when there are groups of people. I don't know how many are in the groups, but the amount of noise it creates is excessive. And I have never been out to say quiet because it's going to cause problems. And with respect, to the boathouse, we don't want to create problems, but we currently endure huge effects of people that drink too much, and no one really has control of that when they leave the boathouse. And when they're walking back into town, this noise is just huge, so we already have to put up with it. So I can only see things getting worse, that it will increase the area that people will be able to drink within, and it will increase the amount of sales. That will only increase the amount of noise and rubbish in the area. And it really is difficult on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. It goes on and on. It doesn't just stop when obviously they stop serving. So it's not like this the whole time, but it already is really hot. We cannot sleep with our windows open at the front of the house in this hot weather during Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights in the summertime because of the noise, and it doesn't block the noise out. So it's already really difficult, and we could move house, but we do like the area, and it's only certain periods of the night time, and often in the daytime when there are festivals already. I think with the ability to serve alcohol, it just creates a festival atmosphere potentially there throughout the whole time. And it just worries me that it will get out of control, or it can get out of control. And already, it's excessive, we feel.
Thank you very much, Mrs. King.
Okay.
Thank you for raising those points.
And obviously litter, sorry, I do have to say.
You will have, Mrs. King, you will have an opportunity to put your submission forward at the appropriate time. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions of the applicant. So I think I'll move on to our next objector, if you're content. Thank you very much for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have Mrs. Ruth Dwyer and Mr. Adrian Dwyer. I'm not sure who's speaking, but I believe one of you is going to speak on behalf of both. So that, please.
Can you hear me?
It's Mrs. Ruth. Okay, Mrs. Dwyer, if you could keep it to a question, please, you'll have an opportunity to put your submission later on. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. The questions, the information that came out with the agenda for this meeting documents, including one entitled MV Decision. I don't know what that relates to, but the information in there is factually correct. The temporary toilets have gone. It states that the kiosk will close at 9, whereas the licence application till 11 or 8 or 9. The license application is till 11 o'clock at night, which is very different.
Can you be more specific, please, as to which document you're attending?
Yeah, it's called
Mrs. Dwyer, please, so members can familiarise themselves with the document. Could you be more clear, please? Or I don't know if Mrs. Graham can help. Thank you.
It's called MV Decision, and it came out with the agenda for today's meeting.
Chair, I might be able to assist with that.
Thank you, Mrs. Graham.
The paper to which Mrs. Dwyer is referring was the reasons why the minor variation was approved last year, over a year ago, and it was part of the licensing officer, Mrs. Rogers.
It's at page 35 of our public documents, is that correct?
So what relevance?
Indeed.
Thank you very much. So we've ascertained where we are. Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer. We now understand what you'd like us to look at. So if you'd like to go forward with your question. Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer.
Well, I'm just asking what relevance it has to the full licence variation, given that that relates to the minor variation, which was rejected.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring in our legal advisor with regard to this, because I did actually ask our legal advisor on this very point, and she very kindly gave me a very, very expansive explanation, and I'm sure she'll be able to explain the law on this. Mrs. Cole, are you happy to do that?
Yes, I'll certainly have a go.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cole. Thank you.
So it's already been referred to, the minor variations, both by Mrs. Rogers, the licensing officer, and Mr. Graham. But the minor variation process is basically it's sort of a light touch application, and if it's for things that the licensing officer don't appear to think will interfere or undermine licensing objectives, the licensing officer will grant that application just as a minor variation. But it's not a particularly thorough process. One, because it's advertised on the building and on the premises. Those that see the advert can make representations, but it doesn't have to be advertised, which Mrs. Graham has already said. And basically, we err on the side of caution. We will consult responsible authorities if we think it's appropriate, but the local authority don't have to do that. And again, the application for a minor variation doesn't have to go to the responsible authorities, but the council will just take it on a case-by-case basis. A general view, might the objections that have been raised by any representations look that they're going to undermine licensing objectives? And in this, with the minor variation application, the number of responses that had been received, we could see that there were residents that were concerned, and the issues that they were raising did connect to licensing objectives. So the advice, certainly from legal at BCP, is if that minor variation should just be rejected and ask the applicant to go towards the full process. So which is what they've done today. So I'm unclear though if Mrs. Dwyer is referring to last year's minor variation application or this year's.
It's the hang on. It's the one that came out with the agenda, which is irrelevant because it doesn't relate to this year's. I'm questioning why it has come out, because we had to resubmit. We were told that anything we submitted for the minor variation, but we had to resubmit, it wouldn't be carried over.
No, that's right.
So this minor variation decision is irrelevant to the full variation, surely. So why is it included in the agenda?
Well, maybe just for background papers. What? So
if I could assist at all, it's page 35, I think, just added to explain why the minor variation was granted in June of 2020. And those were the reasons given for the decision in 2020 by way of background information, why the original minor variation.
Thank you, this is very much down to scene setting, Mrs. Dwyer, and it's often done where we have that historic background because the members come to this with clean hands, but they need to have some understanding of what's happened before. I don't have a problem with this, Mrs. Dwyer. I don't believe the subcommittee members do either. So I think we need to move forward on this point, please, and I'd be grateful if you'd raise your next question. And excuse my bloodhounds barking. Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer.
Okay, the site plan. Who submitted the site plan? Because that's incorrect.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Rogers, are you able to comment on the site plan, or would that be Mrs. Graham?
No, that was made by myself. I went on our BCP plan thing and got it from there, so I can't explain that.
Okay,
It came up 9 Key Road.
Thank you. And this is the boathouse. This is at, if I could just ask people not to speak across me, please. If you do hear me speaking, I'll be grateful if you would stop. We've got the site plan, Mrs. Dwyer, I believe you're referring to, is page 49. Is that correct? Of the public reports? Mrs. Rogers, is that correct?
I don't know the page number. I'm not looking at this. I'm just looking at the copy of the plan. Sorry.
Okay, it's the plan, which is the only plan we have, and it shows the sea and it shows the location of the boathouse. It's a topographical plan. Yes, is that correct? Is that what I'm referring to, Mrs. Dwyer? Could you advise us then where the areas lie, please, and what relevance they might have on the application? Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer.
The map that we have shows Priory Quay, not the boathouse, and we are direct neighbours of the boathouse, not of Priory Quay.
So it's a name issue, is it? And how would you like us to amend the name so that it was more relevant?
No, it's in completely the wrong location. It's shown as being behind Christchurch Sailing Club.
Yes.
Not on it, whereas in fact it's on the corner of Quay Road and Queen's Avenue.
Yes, it's Convent Walk. Yes, when I actually Googled this, I got a different picture myself. So I'm with you on that. Okay, well, we'll take it as read that regrettably we've got the wrong site plan. I don't know whether we could Google something and bring up West Quay Road so that it shows it. Could somebody be helpful there, please? If you wanted to refer to it, other than your reference is just that the site plan is incorrect on this occasion. If we can have a site plan that's correct, that would help. Mrs. Rogers, are you able to assist?
Yep, on it now.
Okay, well, I'll leave that with you, Mrs. Rogers, if you could do that for us. And Mrs. Dwyer, do you have any further questions, or are they just points of fact with regard to errors and omissions? I'd be grateful. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dwyer, for raising those points. Would you like to have things in train? So moving on then to next individual, we have Mrs. Dowling, I don't believe is with us. So Mr. Lucas, if you'd like to put forward any questions, please, with regard to this issue to Mrs. Graham or Mr. Slater's. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillors, just two questions via the applicant solicitor, if possible, please. So we've ascertained that Appendix 1, the MV document, is background context. But in there it raises about cleaners in terms of litter and the environs and the operating hours, if you like, of the cleaners. Can you confirm, if we're not relying upon that document, what are your operation of hours for the cleaners that you...
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Mr. Slater, are you able to answer that? Thank you.
Hello there. So I just took a second to find the mute button on that one. So essentially, yes, that document was for the licence variation that was approved last year. It discusses a couple of items in it that are now dated operationally. It does discuss the WCs, which we brought in last year. Again, during the period of lockdown, when BCP wasn't actually operating the public toilets that were available on the quay. So they were locked and nobody was able to use those. So we realised that there was a large area that had no facilities. So we brought in at quite some expense our own toilets. We got a luxury toilet trailer hire, which we brought on site, and we had cleaners operating all day long, maintaining the hygiene of those toilets, especially with disinfectant. You'll remember this is May last year, when everything, well, as I say, the council didn't even know how to operate their own toilets at that stage of the game with the COVID restrictions in place. So we had hourly disinfections of the toilets at that point in time because people were not able to come on the premises. Obviously, now that the main premises are open, we have the toilets in the main building are available for the use of the public. So now we don't have the outside toilets anymore. We allow people to come into the premises and use those. We have the on-site cleaners during the busiest times that the premises are open. So our toilets are checked and sanitised regularly still, along with the general areas of high contact, high traffic around the building. And I think you were trying to draw a reference as well to the litter collections, which is, so we daily, as part of the operations, we do a litter collection, a full litter collection of the key in the area without fail at closing time. We also do it at opening time. There is litter that appears on the key outside of the hours that we are open. So this does suggest that the public are bringing their own litter to the key. So we are clearing up a lot of litter that is not related to the business. And then throughout the hours of operation, we do ad hoc litter collections. So as we have staff that will go around and keep our tables clear and tidy, we don't just let litter sitting on our tables. We make sure they are cleared between customers, sanitised where possible, assuming the next customers haven't jumped in there too quickly. And we do send staff, if we see litter actively out on the key, we will send our staff out there on regular intervals. And again, we pick up any litter that happens to be out there. We don't question whether it comes from us. And say there is a takeaway, another takeaway on the key. We can very distinctly tell the difference in the litter because they use polystyrene containers. And there's also a lot of litter where it's obviously being brought from home. Again, we can tell the difference. So we are doing large efforts for that litter collection. Again, just as an addendum to that fact, with the takeaway, so far to date, although the application is for an 11 PM end to it, so far this year we have not opened past 8 PM. And for the vast majority of last year, we never opened up past 8 PM. The sole reason that it says 11 PM on the application is to keep it in line with the building licence, not that we are operating as a late night takeaway.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. But it's firmly assumed that let's just clarify what this document is at page 35. It's all the things that were happening and were in train with regard to the minor variation, which was dated 17th of June 2020 last year. So all those things have been happening over the last year due to COVID. COVID is no longer an issue per se. So item 4 of that with regard to WCs has been more or less lifted because the provision is now in-house. I don't believe there are any other issues there which aren't applicable. I think they're all still in train, and we've heard now about the litter pick. So I hope that is a satisfactory.
Chairman, if I may, so we've heard that document refers to litter operatives operating between noon and 8 PM. You've just heard from the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. If you just let me get to litter, okay, we're just getting there, okay. So with regard to litter, could we have? We've now heard the clarification from Mr. Graham that had changed. So with regard to litter and WCs, we do have those matters are no longer in train, and there's a slight difference in timings on the litter. So I hope you're content now with that information, Mr. Lucas, and thank you very much for raising that.
No, Madam Chairman, so we've had a commitment that the operative will be operating prior to opening. So I believe the boathouse conditions and license operates from 10 AM, and then the application before you is until 11 PM. And then you've heard from Mr. Slater that the cleaning operative will be there prior to opening and after closing. So that's a window of 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. for litter operative. So you need to draw that distinction out, and I would urge you to have that in mind when you make your decision. You've heard that from the applicant themselves. There was a second question as well, Madam Chairman. Can you confirm through your representative, Ms. Graham, that all of the sales of alcohol will be through plastic containers and not through glassware, and you give that undertaking today?
Thank you. I'll ask Mrs. Graham, party to party, please. Thank you, Mrs. Graham.
Thank you. It's confirmed that, obviously, I can't give a personal undertaking, as Mr. Lucas appreciates. It is confirmed that all the receptacles, if I can use that word, because they're not actually plastic glasses, the receptacles that are used for dispensing not just alcohol, but all drinks, that the coffees there are very popular, are recyclable. I'm not quite sure what the material is, but recyclable, ethical, sustainable containers, and there is no glass bottles or glasses dispensing alcohol.
Thank you. So we ascertain and give a confirmation there, Mr. Lucas. Thank you for raising that they are not glass, but not quite sure of their makeup, but they're not glass and they are environmentally sustainable. I will ask then, we have something on the table which has been put forward, which is the litter pickers. Are they to be doing their work between 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. with regard to the operational hours? Mr. Slater, can you answer, please? Or if not, can you please give a definition as to when they will be doing this, please?
Yeah, basically we are, the main premises actually opens at 9 a.m. Prior to the licensing. Obviously not selling alcohol during that time, but selling coffee. And so from 9 a.m. we do have staff out litter picking and maintaining the area.
And this is until when, Mr. Slater?
Well, again, until 11 o'clock at night would be when the premises, the main premises close. I would point out this is several hours after the takeaway, which has say, been closing at 8 p.m. to date. And again, as part of the closing procedures, our staff do check the area for any rubbish at that point in time as well.
Thank you very much for that clarity. That's extremely helpful. I hope that that assists you, Mr. Lucas, wherever you've gone. Are you still with us?
It does indeed, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
There you are. You are. You disappeared for a minute, Mr. Lucas. Any further questions, Mr. Lucas? Please answer them. Please ask them.
No, that's the two questions, Madam Chairman, as promised.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lucas. Extremely helpful to help draw us out a better understanding of where we are. We're grateful. Councillor Avril Coulton, it's your opportunity to raise any questions, please. You'll have time for your submission later with regards to Mrs. Graham's submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I do. An off-sales, thank you, Madam Chairman. An off-sales facility will enable the boathouse. Can you hear me?
You're a bit muffled.
Am I? Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's see. Is that any better?
Yes, perhaps stand a little way from your mic. You're getting a little bit of
right. Okay. Sorry about this. An off-sales facility. I'll speak slowly. You can't hear me, can you?
No, it's very, very echoey. Max, can you offer any advice for Councillor Lucas, please, as to how we might hear her better? Any tech out there that can offer some advice as to how we can hear Councillor Lucas better, please?
Councillor Coulton.
I do beg your pardon.
Right.
Madam Chair, if everyone else mutes their mics, that might help a little bit.
Okay, let's all mute our mics then, please, if we would.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. An off-sales facility will enable the boathouse to sell alcohol to people attending various functions on the Quamps, i.e. food festivals, stomping on the Quamps, music festivals, classical cars, etc. in an uncontrolled way. Any authorised sale of alcohol at these functions is currently done through a TENS licence with BCP imposed restrictions, compelling people to remain within a controlled area controlled by the retail outlet. This is also supervised by numbers in and out. The boathouse would not be restricted to this. An off-sales facility and people would be...
Sorry, Councillor Colton, can I just stop you there? Is this part of your submission? Because we're looking for questions at this moment. It seems a very long introduction.
There is a question at the end here.
There's a question at the end. Okay, carry on, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Would be restricted, oh, I didn't know where I got to now. If the boathouse, would not be restricted to this and people would be able to walk around drinking. How will the BCP Licensing Committee deal with this? Because here you're allowing one premises to walk around with glasses, but you're giving a license to a Thames license to food festivals, jumping on the quants, where they all have to be corralled in an area.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
This is a question for BCP, not the applicant. Perhaps we could ask Mrs. Rogers to answer, although Mrs. Rogers, the opportunity to ask her questions was during her submission, but we'll revert back. Mrs. Rogers, are you able to assist?
Yeah, I was struggling to repeat the last bit.
Yes, Councillor Coulton, so sorry, the audio is really poor. Could you just repeat the last bit with regard to your question, please?
Yes, how will the BCP Licensing Committee deal with this?
How does the Licensing Committee deal with this? Well, then that might be a question for Mrs. Cole, but I will leave the officers to field that. Thank you.
I would revert that to Mrs. Cole. I'm still not clear on what the question was.
Mrs. Cole, can you assist?
I'll try. Councillor Colton, so your question, I believe, I understand your B, that the boathouse are allowed to, well, if the licence is granted, would be allowed to sell off sale of alcohol up to 11 o'clock, where you're saying at the moment any alcohol sales for events are done by way of a 10 application, and the event team, probably I would suggest the event team get involved with any planning of events, and if they're on the quamps, BCP Council have now got their own premises licence for the area, which is only for regulated entertainment. But if they wanted to sell alcohol, they would have to make an application for a 10 to sell that alcohol there. And part of the planning of the event would include the different controls that you've said. So if it's like small areas that have been fenced off, or with a boundary, that's what they would be controlled. So BCP Council would be looking at the events team to show through their plans that the event can be controlled in a sort of in a proper, responsible way.
Sorry, Mrs. Cole, I think you've got the wrong end of the stick.
Okay.
How is it that events will have to have a tent and be corralled into various places, whereas the boathouse can carry on selling and having the people walk around with their glasses?
Well, I suppose the thing is the application today is for off sale of alcohol, and if that application is granted, that's what an off sale of alcohol will allow. There is always, the Licensing Act does include a review procedure, and if there was a real problem with sales of alcohol from the boathouse that could be pushed back to the boathouse and proved it was the boathouse, any local resident or responsible authority could call the premises in for a review. So certainly if there were those problems occurring, it would be looked at by the Licensing Committee, but that would be the reason that the Licensing Committee would get involved in the future should an application be granted today.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cole. That's quite clear. Councillor Coulton, would you like to ask another question, please?
No, thank you. Not at this time.
Thank you very much for raising it. I'm so sorry to be having difficulty hearing you, so we've had to ask you to repeat yourself. We do apologise. Thank you very much for your patience. I think Mrs. Cole, I'd like to bring you in on the question with regard to the area plan. I know now if we look on our chat that Mrs. Rogers has kindly put the link for the planned area and how that's affected. I wondered if you'd like to clarify further now. Thank you, Mrs. Cole, or Mrs. Rogers. I'm happy with either. Thank you.
I've got a couple of points that Mrs. Graham, I'm sure, will be able to clarify for me. Thank you. It appears, Mrs. Graham, we don't appear at the council to have a plan of the licence area for the boathouse. It wasn't a document that came over to the council from Christchurch Borough Council. So we're a little bit struggling. So I just wonder if you can clarify. Hopefully, if you've been involved in the premises so long. So I'm assuming that the current licence footprint of the premises already covers the original outside area that's been there years and years. I mean, it is a little while since I've been down to the premises, but I'm assuming that is already a licensed area, but the new area, that the terrace areas that you've shown in the pictures with the benches where you've got the caravan to sell the takeaway, that isn't licensed. Is that right?
Thank you, Mrs. Graham.
It is within the licensed area, Mrs. Cole, in the sense that the licence plan, which has been in situ, or the outline of the licence plan, has been there many years, and the red line, so to speak, goes around the whole premises and, in fact, the Crazy Gulf. So we're still within the original red outline of the whole site.
But for the supply of alcohol on sales, where's that allowed then at the moment?
It's within the building, and in actual fact, from memory, I haven't got the plan to hand. In actual fact, from memory, I think it covers most of the Crazy Golf area as well.
Okay, so
the area for the takeaway is within the existing licensed area, but because the premises license is historic, as I explained earlier, there is no current provision for off sales within the license per se.
So your application for the off sales really is to allow people to take the alcohol out of the licensed area, so outside the red line. So we're satisfied. So the pictures you've shown with all those tables and chairs, already you can sell your alcohol there, and that's fine. So this application, it's just to clarify, because we're struggling without the plan earlier, it is just to take the alcohol outside the red line as such.
It is to give them the option, yes.
To give them the option,
because,
I understand.
In terms of practice on site, people will buy some food and drink, or perhaps only one of them has alcohol, but then they'll wander onto the prompts and sit down if the weather's good, or they'll wander back, or they'll start at the table and then go for a walk. And it's really to cover the scenario for the operator, so that he can be sure that wherever they take it, it's above board. He wouldn't want to breach anything. And it's a strange old license, which is why we tried to update it to allow him to do what most premises with recent grants of premises licenses would do anyway. It's nothing, it's just that it's got its own idiosyncrasies from way back.
Yes, no, I understand. Thank you for that clarification. Chair, I just did have one more question about the
yes, please
the
do
hours.
it, Mrs. Cole. Thank you.
I think it was Mr. Slater that mentioned. I just wanted a little bit of clarity. I know your application is for the off sales to 11 p.m. but you have mentioned more than once that you don't operate that caravan, and to sell the off sales. So is there any movement there in the off sales to an earlier time? I just don't know what your plan is for your off sales.
In practice, I'd say 9 times out of 10, if not more than that, the off sales airstream closes around 8 o'clock. In effect, it's been flexible, but it closes when there's nobody wanting to picnic anymore on the quants, and 8 o'clock is about that time of night during the summer, when people dissipate naturally, and then when they dissipate naturally, it closes. We did put in 11 because we've had 11 for the past year. We've always operated that. And in conversation with your licensing department, they said that the standard hours going forward, where they've allowed this with other premises, the 11 o'clock cutoff has been the norm. And my clients, on occasions where there is something happening, may well want to go to 11, but it's certainly not the norm. I don't know if Mr. Slater wants to add to that.
All I can say is...
Do you wish to add to it? If you could be succinct, please. Thank you.
Not a problem. So far to date, I would say that 8 o'clock has been a late opening time for us. We haven't done any nights where it has been opened to the 11 o'clock mark. We've had this going back over a year now. We haven't opened until 11 o'clock at any point during that time. As Sandra says, we were advised that that is the time in general on these licenses that are being granted. So it is in place. It is not something that we have any plans in the future to utilise until that late, but it obviously has the flexibility built in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dry. That's extremely helpful. Did you have any further questions, Mrs. Cole, or are you content? It's certainly helped me, and I'm sure it's helped the other subcommittee members draw a view. Thank you.
I just have one. Again, it's just for clarity for me. The off sale of alcohol then is only going to be sold from the Airstream, the van. They won't be there's no plan for people to go into the main bar area within the premises and then take the alcohol away.
No, that is the whole reason that we have the Airstream for that market that is out there. As we say, the inside, we are a family restaurant. We've been operating table service throughout the whole of the COVID scenario. As restrictions were released on Monday, rather, we are still operating table service. That is our style of operation. We don't plan to be trying to attract customers to come into the building to buy drinks and take them away. And in fact, I would say at various points over the past year, we've had customers try to do so, and we've explained to them that we don't do it from the main building and directed them to the Airstream outside, even though that would have been covered by the temporary by the takeaway licence that's in place.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that clarification, Mrs. Cole. It is helpful for the subcommittee members. Thank you. So I've just got one more person to ask if there's any questions of the applicant, and that's you, Mrs. Rogers. Do you have anything?
No, thank you very much. I'm fine.
Thank you very much for dashing away and trying to find some information for us. It's much appreciated.
Okay.
So now we move on to other persons, our objectors, and this is your opportunity to put your representations with regard to this application, with regard to the complying with the 4 licensing objectives. So I'll start with Mrs. King. Mrs. King, thank you. You have as long as you like, Mrs. King. So take your time. We're here to listen. Thank you so much. Are you with us, Mrs. King? Have we lost Mrs. King?
I'm just looking, Chair, to see if she has left the conversation. Bear with me.
I can't see her on my screen.
Madam Chair, she's left the meeting. She did sing in and out today.
She did say that she was short on time, didn't she? Okay, we're sorry to have lost Mrs. King. Well, we've got her written summation, which I believe is at, is it 6? Can you refresh my memory, please, Mrs. Porter?
It's at 4.
It's at 4. Okay, so members, Mrs. King's written summation, which she's unfortunately not able to bring herself today, is at 4. So if we can be mindful of the content of that in our deliberations and our questions. Thank you very much. So moving on then to our next objector, who is, I believe, Mrs. Ruth Dwyer. You're going to put forward your submission on behalf of yourself and your husband. Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer.
It's actually Adrian Dwyer who's speaking.
Hey, Mr. Dwyer, you're going to put forward. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm not being paid by the hour, so I'll try and be brief.
No, quite.
I was very grateful to Ms. Graham for showing the pictures of the boathouse, and indeed, the proprietors should be congratulated for the improvements that they've made to the premises. You know, they've really done a very good job, and they've expanded and expanded and expanded. And I think there comes a point in time when one says enough is enough, and expanding onto the off sales onto quants is beyond enough. And I should point out that we've been informed that because of concerns over breach of planning, concerns over breach of license, BCP have now escalated the issue to appointing a single point of contact to because of the scope and extent of potential breaches, there will now be a single point of contact. And on breaches, you know, it should be noted that the Town Council, who are the authority for the for quants, were prompt in enforcing a breach that was done by the boathouse earlier on. Coming to a point that Mrs. Graham made about the young people.
I think it would be helpful in your summation if you could tell us what that breach was, because the subcommittee are not aware of any reports with regard to that. I think it might be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, there was an expansion onto the quants of a seated area, bench seating, which, you know, may well have been done in the best intentions, but
so it was it's a planning matter, Mr. Dwyer. Yes.
Well, that's a slightly more complicated question, because one thing that hasn't come up in this so far is that the statutory authority for planning is BCP. The statutory, the authority for quants is not BCP, it's the Town Council, and yet BCP licensing authority is potentially licensing the sale of alcohol over land that is under the control of the Town Council.
Actually, Mr. Dwyer, we have BCP have control of land throughout its realm, and we have a licensing policy which covers Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. But as you've raised the issue, for clarity, I would ask that Mrs. Cole advises us there. Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Well, there is. Can I just make one final point on that?
Clarification, yes. Thank you, Mrs. Cole. Thank you, Mrs. Cole, if you'd like to clarify.
Yeah, so, well, the only thing I can add is the Licensing Act does expect any applicant for a premises licence to apply for the to the local authority, and the local authority for this area is BCP Council. So it is the right place to make the application. That the Licensing Act sets that out, and so it is the licensing authority then that would have to make the decision on that application. But obviously the town council can make reps, which they have done today. So that all has to be taken into consideration.
It was the Town Council that enforced the breach, not BCP Council. I think one further point on this is that for the conditions, exercising the conditions of off sales, for example, exercising security, would probably require the consent of the Town Council in order to go and enforce security on the land that the Town Council are the authority for. So there's clearly an issue there that needs to be addressed. I'll go on to another point.
Mr. Dwyer, thank you. If you just stop for one moment, it is an issue and is something which the subcommittee has before it. and it's something that we need clarification and confirmation on. There seems to be, yes, thank you, Mrs. Cole. There does seem to be a clash of interests here. Who is responsible for what, please? Thank you.
So the way I would view it is we have to look at the legislation. So to make an application for a license, it's got to be done to BCP Council. But in much the same way, if licensing premises, they have to make applications for licensing, for planning. They have to make sure that everything is in sync for them to operate. So it would be for the boathouse if there's other regulations that they have to comply with that the town council say, and I don't know what they are because I'm not aware of it, then it would be for the boathouse to make sure they have everything in sync so that they deal with everything in the responsible way and in accordance with all the legislation that they may have to comply with.
Well,
okay, that's really helpful.
A temporary event notice, for example, goes to the town council, not to BCP. And unless Ms. Graham can advise, I don't believe the town council have given any particular consents to the boathouse.
Madam Chair, I can deal with this quite simply.
Mr. Lucas, if you could be helpful, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Madam Chairman, the town council is the proprietor of the Quamps, the large grass area, the bandstand, and the listed building. In fairness to the applicants, Mr. Dwyer's raised the issue. I think it needs a fair response. I'm mindful he's represented by a solicitor. There was an issue with tables and chairs being put onto the Quamps without the proprietorship, i.e. the owner, the town council, agreeing to that.
So that was a planning issue, Mr. Lucas.
Not a planning issue because it was just, if you like, an incursion. It's only a planning issue if a planning enforcement officer goes out and makes it an issue. So the tables and chairs, bear with me, Chairman.
If I could speak, please. We need to ascertain if it was a breach of the licensing of the license or a breach of planning.
Not at all, Matt. And you can also ascertain if it's a trespass, a private law matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be, if you like, a planning or a licensing issue. This was simply tables and chairs were put out. One of my councillors saw it. I went down to the boathouse as the town clerk. I had a polite conversation with one of the managers there. They recognised they didn't have the consent of the town council. It was dealt with. They disappeared. So with respect, it wasn't a huge issue. Tables and chairs appeared. I had a polite conversation with a manager down there. They then went away. So probably it didn't become a planning enforcement matter because it was dealt with expeditially. And then the issue essentially was redressed. So by putting tables and chairs on town council property, it would need the consent in a proprietary sense, not in a license or a planning sense. It may well turn out to be a planning matter as well if they're fixed to the ground and they become development for the purposes of planning permission, but I would suggest they won't be because they won't be fixed to the ground. It was just a transient issue and it was dealt with. Mrs. Graham, that's the fairest way I can put it for your client.
Thank you very much, Mr. It's most grateful to you. I now clearly understand that.
Chair, could I just clarify that possibly?
Thank you. I don't know if you want to come in and comment further with regard to any confirmation in that.
Thank you, and I'm grateful to Mr. Lucas for that. I'm advised from Mr. Slater that last year on one occasion benches were put on the grass area with the consent, and it was during lockdown, of BCP Council, who my client wrongly supposed owned the public space. And as soon as Mr. Lucas drew it to their attention that the town council were the owners of the land, not BCP, from whom approval had been obtained, then the chairs and tables were immediately removed. And it was just, as Mr. Lucas puts it, a transient issue.
That's really helpful. So it was who was husbanding the land ownership. So essentially a planning issue with regard to that, but it's extremely helpful. I hope that we've been able to delve into that and to assure our subcommittee members that it would seem from what we've heard that this wasn't a licensing issue per se, so not a licensing breach, I believe, as Mr. Dwyer suggested and quite openly may have thought it was that. So I think we've clarified that. So thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. And if we could ask you, Mr. Dwyer, to carry on with your submission. Thank you very much. Are you with us, Mr. Dwyer? Keep losing people.
Oh, there
you are.
it is acknowledged that the benches were taken away promptly, but the point of mentioning it is this non-joining up, if you like, of the legal issues surrounding the land ownership and licensing. And I will come back onto that in my final point. But before I go on to that, Ms. Graham mentioned the fact that families, young children, older people like the ambience of Quamps. I don't think the community, and you can judge by the number of people who have responded to this, I don't think the community feel that the enjoyment of that area is in any way increased by the sale of sales alcohol. In fact, as Mr. Slater mentioned, it did attract lots of very young, boisterous people. And I have no objection to those people on a Friday or Saturday night. It's the most popular place in town for young people. I've no objection to that happening inside the boathouse. I don't see as there's any reason whatsoever to have that on Quamps. I'll go on to my final point, which is that as a former chairman of somebody who organises a major event on Quamps, we have to apply for a temporary event licence from the town council. We have to have an agreed level of security. We have to have first aid on site. We have to have fire prevention, escape routes. We have to have a control mechanism for controlling the numbers of people. We have to submit a 50-page plan. We then have to attend a safety advisory group where I'm grilled by 22 experts. None of that is there is a provision for that within the license application. So in effect, you've got two sets of rules. So the licensing authority, if it grants this application, will need to be assured that the boathouse customers can comply with the conditions of the boathouse license, and the managers of temporary events will have to comply with their set of conditions when the place is packed with thousands of people. Of course, that's a nonsense.
Okay, in my long history of licensing since the inception of the Licensing Act 2003 and putting the authorities in place in the Borough of Poole, that is a given. That the compliance within the requirements for a TENS licence, if you do not comply, you're in breach, and then you can be in difficulties. And the compliance with regard to the licence of the boathouse, I'm not quite sure why you're concerned that the boathouse, with regard to their premise licence and the TENS, would not conduct themselves apropos to the requirements under law. Is that a concern of yours, Mr. Dwyer?
Perhaps actually make a clarification. You've got one set of rules for the boathouse. You've got another set of rules for people organising events on the Quamps. And I think this is further complicated by the fact that in having a licence with the town council for implementing security measures, that licence is in place. But the boathouse doesn't have authority from the town council for any provision of management of people on Quamps. So there's a mismatch of rules here that are completely unsatisfactory.
Well, the rules aren't actually a mismatch, Mr. Dwyer. They come under the Licensing Act 2003, and they are as they are. We have application with regard to people who can put forward an application for a licence, and we have rules and regulations with regard to TENS, and that's provided for under the Licensing Act. It's not a policy or a whim that we've just brought in. But I will ask for clarification, please, from Mrs. Cole. Thank you, Mrs. Cole, who is our legal advisor.
Thank you, Chair. So as far as I would understand it, any TEN application would have to be made to BCP Council. It seems that permission probably has to be sought from the owner of the land. Mr. Lucas will confirm this. So the owner of the land we've established is Christchurch Town Council. So before anyone can run their event on the land belonging to Christchurch Town Council, they would apply to the town council for permission to use their land for an event. And I don't know what the town council considers when they give that permission or don't give that permission. But once they've given permission, the application for a temporary event notice then has to be made to the local authority. And in this case, it would be BCP Council. In past years, it would have been Christchurch Borough Council.
Thank you, and that is what is required. That is due process. So, and that would come within the ownership of the land with regard to the town council, who have an absolute right for applicants to seek their permission for use of their land, and then to move on to a TENS application, which comes under the BCP remit with strict guidelines and rules and regulations. I think we'll move on, Mr. Dwyer, please, if you'd like to carry on with your submission. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not satisfied with that, unfortunately, Madam Chairman, with the greatest respect. What I'm saying is there's one set of rules for the boathouse and another set of rules for a temporary event. So
we will take your point. We will take your point in terms, Mr. Dwyer, but this isn't really taking forward the application, and it isn't taking forward the other points you'd like to raise, and the subcommittee would like to hear them. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. So if you'd like to carry on with your submission.
One final point, and that is, whilst it is respected the fact that the boathouse do charge a premium for the alcohol, what actually happens in practice, and I think this was iterated by Mr. Slater, is that it attracts people bringing low-cost alcohol to meet their friends who have bought, 1 or 2 pints from the premium price, and they bring lots of beer from cheap supermarkets. So it substantially increases the amount of alcohol that's consumed on quants, and I don't believe that's an area that is appropriate for that. That's my final submission.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll take that on advisement. Thank you very much, Mr. Dwyer, for your submissions. It always gets perhaps a little bit, we all get a little heated in our conversations, but it's really useful to hear from our other persons as to their concerns and their thoughts, because we want to be able to provide for all parties. So it's really important that we do hear these objections. And thank you very much for yours, Mr. Dwyer. It's much appreciated. So moving on then, Mr. Lucas, it's your opportunity now to put forward your submission. And thank you very much for your previous assistance with regard to some issues that arose. Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So really 2 points of housekeeping. First of all, I think my friend Mrs. Graham's mentioned about the town council lateness of the submission and the email. If I can just clarify that and put that into context. The town council obviously has to summons a formal council meeting. There's statutory requirements to give notice of that meeting. Nevertheless, it did respond via its full council, and you have that in the agenda papers. In terms of emailing the officer, yes, it was a named officer email, simply because you get to know the BCP officers when you work in a town council and a unitary. It's unfortunate that our representation landed in the inbox of an officer who was unfortunately away from the office. But I'm led to believe that that inbox was, if you like, scoured. And then finally, the representation was, if you like, received by the licensing authority. And one would hope the licensing authority done its utmost to expedite and get that representation across to the applicant. And I think that's the best way I can put that. There's no underhand motive for myself replying direct to a licensing officer. It's just I know the planning officers and licensing officers, and it was just simply an email conveying the council resolution. I hope that puts my friend, the acting on behalf of the applicant's concern in some sort of context. Secondly, Madam Chairman, in terms of the license, now this is the key thing that the town council gives. I think the best way to call that is a consent, as you quite rightly identified. We control and we are the owners of that site. Anyone who wants to run an event, we give a consent. Now, unfortunately, as my friend will know, when you grant a consent to go on land, indeed, the licensing authority solicitor will know, is called a license in a sense, not a lease, a license. And it's just there's the word license doesn't parry with a license under the Licensing Act. It's a consent to be on land. So please, the objectors, when the town council issues a license, it's not one of the regulatory licenses such as planning or licensing. It's simply a consent as a landowner to go on our land. Otherwise, that would be a trespass. And in that license, you go through the normal processes to make sure the insurers are happy, That is all the risk assessments, gas safety certificates, all the protocols, all the electricians, making sure all the statutory partners are correct. And part of that process is the town council has a safety advisory group, much like BCP events, where we are advised by that safety advisory group to ensure that everything is in hand. So I hope that clarifies for the objectors, when the town council issues a licence, it's simply a consent to be on our land for an event, not a regulatory licence, which, as my friends will know at the Licensing Authority for the applicant, are licences per se under the 2003 Act and the Town and Country Plan Act 1990. That being said, Madam Chairman, my submissions, you've got it already from my council. You'll find that in the pack at Appendix 5. This went before full council of the Town Council on the 22nd of June, and the minutes is there in its entirety. There's two, if you like, representations, and I'm grateful for the courtesy to expand and amplify those points. The first one is in relation to the licensing objective concerning public nuisance. It has to be borne in mind, and I emphasise this, councillors, that this is in very close proximity to residential premises. This is indeed shown by the force and strength and number of those representations you've received on this matter. The main concerns seem to stem around litter, and that's why previously I put those questions through you, Madam Chairman, to the applicant about understanding what arrangements are in place for litter. And now we have, if you like, a not an undertaking in a legal sense, but if you like, a guarantee that there will be a member of staff, be that a contractor. It's not clear if it's a member of pub staff or a contractor, who will be there to look at the litter in the environs and on the quamps, if I can put it that way. But prior to opening and after closing, here I draw your attention to the section 182 guidance at paragraph 1.5. There is no responsible authority coming back and putting a representation in. By responsible authority, that would be here the Environmental Health Service, or indeed trading standards. Nevertheless, the guidance makes it quite clear when you're engaged with quite strong residential feelings at paragraph 1.5, it's vitally important that the principal aims are for everyone to be involved in licensing work, and that is encouraging the greater community involvement in licensing decisions and giving local residents the opportunity to have their say. That is vitally important. So I urge you not to be blinkered by the fact that you do not have a responsible authority here raising a representation. That's probably always going to be the case, because there are no noise nuisance complaints that obviously the EHO has brought to your attention. However, environmental health, I ask you to look at within the purview of your services, whether indeed that would be environmental health who will respond relating to litter, or would it be street scene, for example, who look after litter. So if environmental health do not have the purview of litter, then one would suggest that you would need to perhaps talk to street scene, and that's why you don't have any comments about litter here. So if environmental health are engaged principally about the Control of Pollution Act, the Environmental Protection Act in terms of statutory noise nuisances, and if your functions of litter have been delegated to those other authorised individuals, for example, those who are not EHOs but who can issue fixed penalties, that would then deal with why you do not have any comments coming from environmental health relating to litter, because you've delegated it perhaps to street scene outside of the environmental health remit. So I urge you to look at paragraph 1.5 of the guidance and take on board. It's vitally important that everyone should be involved in the licensing process, and indeed the encouragement of the greater community here, and that ergo the comments you've heard from the residents. That being said, the second concern raised from the town council relates to crime and disorder. In fairness to the applicant and in fairness to the whole committee, there is now, I believe, and your legal advisor will take this away in session before you pronounce the decision, I believe now there is a PSPO, a Public Spaces Protection Order, across the whole of this area. The applicant has not raised this, so it's fair to say that the PSPO could arguably deal with alcohol-related nuisance. And indeed, that order was made I'm led to believe in July of this year. So the PSPO will now enable and empower a constable if there are gatherings, alcohol drinking on the quamps. It will enable the constable to challenge, ask for that container to be effectively confiscated and then tipped down the drain, so to speak. Not only a constable, but also authorised persons where that can be delegated to. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the police. BCP Council can authorise, for example, civil enforcement officers under that order as well. That being said, that there is a PSPO in this particular area dealing with alcohol nuisance related issues, this area is a pristine location in Christchurch. You've heard the strength of the comments. It's within the vicinity of a listed bandstand. That is a listed community asset. So I urge you, please, to look at what conditions are available in your toolbox where you can perhaps deal with litter, with alcohol-related nuisance or alleged antisocial behaviours. And it might well be, for example, bottle or plastic receptacle swatch schemes that's on the bottom of plastic containers, so that if there is litter attributable to the particular premises making this application, your street cleansers, the town council operatives can see, for example, if it's a blue plastic blue dot on the bottom of a receptacle, that's obviously come from the boathouse. Because it's easy and fair to say, and the applicant has made this submission, that there are multiple operators within this area. So you as a licensing authority cannot distill and ascertain whether the boathouse is responsible. That's always going to be the case, given the nighttime economy, the proximity to the high street. So why not bottle watch and day dot the bottom of the plastic receptacles, and let's see if the litter is indeed attributable to the actual premise, and then you'll have your answer going forwards, or indeed the community can bring it in terms of review. Madam Chairman, those are my submissions, but essentially I ask you please to pay attention to the guidance here, where the community should be actively encouraged. It's vitally important. And also your statement of licensing policy. I've noted at paragraph 13 of that, it is very silent about litter. It talks about public nuisance in the terms of noise and the impacts of noise, of course, but it seems to have missed a trick in relation to litter. So I urge you please to look at paragraph 13 of your statement of licensing policy. There are clear lacunas there in terms of litter. Hence my submissions here about dotting plastic receptacles so that you as the licensing authority can understand and grasp that that litter is arguably perhaps attributable to that establishment. Madam Chairman, those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With regard to your issue over who's responsible for litter, who is the head responsible individual, it comes to environmental health. And it's a two-way stream. It doesn't just go to street scene and then street scene, do not report to environmental health with regard to the litter issues. So everybody is aware, so we can measure it. So if we have not had issues over it, it's because we haven't had issues over it. It's not because A hasn't talked to B. It's a lateral flow information. We take with regard to the suggestion with regard to how we might mark up litter so that businesses are not having to pick up other people's litter. But I think the whole issue is that we don't want litter. It's to try and stop the litter in the first place. Yes, we do have a PSPO on the area of the comps with regard to alcohol. So that indeed will mitigate or should mitigate some fears with regard to crime and disorder on this area and alleviate some of the concerns that the boathouse might have with regard to this, which is also sensitive to them. So thank you very much for your contributions. As always, Mr. Lucas, you're extremely eloquent and very, very helpful with regard to your advice. And you've certainly tried to help all people, and I'm extremely grateful.
Much obliged, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we have heard from Mr. Lucas. So Councillor Coulton, it's your opportunity. Now, we are having a bit of difficulty with your mic, so we're going to have to listen very carefully. Maybe if you speak a little slower, that we might be able to pick up everything you have to say, because it's extremely important we hear your contributions. Thank you, Councillor Coulton.
Well, I think that, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're listening in.
Okay. My town clerk, Daniel Lucas, has stolen my thunder with the PSPO. So all I was going to say was that the quants were given a PSPO, as he said, in July. So the BCP Council must feel there is a good reason for the two conditions, which I won't go into now. Surely selling off sales will only exacerbate these conditions. I have finished.
You're on mute.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Who muted me? Who muted me? Who stopped me talking? Actually, who did mute me? I prefer not to be muted, thank you, so I can come in. We got up to you felt that the extra time allowed the off sales would exacerbate the conditions with regard to crime. That part in your summation. So if you'd like to continue, because we lost you, thank you.
No, I stopped then.
Oh, you stopped?
Yes, because Dan Lucas has stolen all my thunder regarding PSPO.
I'm sorry, say it again.
That's it. I won't say any more.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, we'll take that advice. And thank you so much. Okay, so thank you very much for those contributions, submissions. So now it's we have questions of the other persons, all our objectors. So we go round in turn again. So members, do you have any questions with regard to the submissions made by the objectors? You can be specific if you so wish with individual objectors, or you can put a question out there in the generality. I'll come to you first, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhat infuriatingly, but also very helpfully, every question that I had seemed to be answered about 30 seconds after it came up. So at this time, I don't actually have any further questions. Thank you.
You always continue to have those questions at the ready, Councillor Johnson. Absolutely. So we're grateful to you. Thank you very much. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I guess it relates to. I've got two questions. So one is about the events on the key. On the quants, rather.
Is the question, Councillor Hadley, to the objectors? The question to the objectors with regard to their summations rather than a general question. We can take some general questions at the end if that's assistive.
That's probably a general question. Okay.
Okay, so what we'll do then is once we've heard from the questions put to our other persons, if you'd like to put your questions in the generality, and we can get those answered for you from officers if that's assistive. Yes? Okay, thank you. So there are no other questions apart from the two in the generality. Yes, so they weren't to the objectors. Okay, thank you very much. So Mrs. Graham, your opportunity now to put any questions with regard to the objectors' summations forward. Thank you. Are you with us, Mrs. Graham? Your opportunity for questions of the objectors' submissions, please. You're on mute.
I do apologise, Ma'am. My clicker was not clicking in the correct location. I don't believe, I was just clarifying with Mr. Slater, I don't believe we have any questions for the objectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. And are there any questions from our officer, Mrs. Rogers? Do you have any questions, Sarah?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll take this opportunity. Councillor Hadley has some questions to the generality. It might not be of the other persons, but it's always important to have questions raised so that we can get answers to better further our decision. So Councillor Hadley, if you'd like to put them, please.
Well, so one was around events, and we heard from the applicant that they were talking about 8 o'clock as being the latest that they would expect to be running their work, but one of the concerns from some of the objectors was about the difference between an event and the constraints upon someone running an event, and if it was Stomps on the Quay or fireworks night or when the fair is in town. We haven't had those because of COVID, but we will be getting back to those presumably from this year. whether the intent would be to actually make use of the extension of the license to 11 o'clock, and therefore the potential for a controlled event within a boundary, and there often is a paling fence put up, and an uncontrolled event, uncontrolled sales outside the boundary. So that was one. The other was noise nuisance, which was raised possibly by the person who wasn't able to be with us, and there was a diary log given of noise, and I just wondered, was that actually emanating from the boathouse or from on the Quamps itself? Because we've had a lot of people in most of our public spaces actually using those in a very different way over the last year, as they haven't been able to congregate indoors or meet people indoors, and particularly sort of outside the control of the applicant, I suppose. It's a question of whether the noise actually emanated from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that was Mrs. King's concern. Mrs. Graham, are you able to assist, please?
Mum, we noted Mrs. King's points. Neither myself nor Mr. Slater can expand on that, in the sense that we've no idea, without being there at the time, to know where these people came, but we're not aware of anyone coming out of the boathouse, particularly in any numbers that would cause noise nuisance outside. And there's no direct evidence as to where these people actually came from. I would refer you back to my photographs, if I may. There is one photograph showing a notice that appears all around the site.
Yeah.
Quite sure which number it is in the bundle. And those notices asking people to respect neighbours and leave quietly are obvious around the premises, and the staff are at great measures, because they are aware of their neighbourhood, when people leave at night, to ask them as they go out to say good night, to leave quietly and pass away. But the trouble is, we don't know who comes from the Quamps, who's passing, or whoever else is in the vicinity, but the premises are quite responsible at asking people to leave quietly and ensuring, as far as they're able to do so, that they do in the immediate environs of the premises.
Thank you very much. It's actually photograph number 7, and it says, please keep noise to a minimum, respect local residents. I was going to raise something there, but as chair, I can conduct the meeting as I so wish. So very happy to have been able to facilitate your question, Councillor Hadley, and thank you for it. But I wanted to ask Mr. Slater if Mrs. King had approached you at all with regard to this specific noise nuisance she was suffering. Had she come and had a chat and said, look, the boathouse seems to be very noisy, seems to be coming from you, so you could ascertain whether it was you or not? Had she approached you?
I will have to be honest that I am pretty good with faces, but I am terrible with names.
Okay.
So I would not be able to confirm. I would say that we do have conversations with our neighbours from time to time. If they have any concerns, they know that they are able to come and talk to us. We make ourselves readily available on site. If there are any issues that we can address, we do our best to address them.
Okay, my next thought is that we do on many occasions, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Hadley and the other members who make up the subcommittees from time to time, we ask whether a number be provided. So if there is noise nuisance and it's going on at that moment in time, or deemed to be coming from a premise, the individual resident has the opportunity to be able to phone a number and say, look, there's a bit of noise coming from your premise, can you help? And if you can ascertain it's not coming from your premise, it's extremely helpful. So it may be that we would ask that under the conditions, or you might wish to offer this as a condition, that a notice is put up with an available telephone number. So with regard to noise, people can call you and make you aware that they are suffering thus, if of course it's your good self. So did you have any comment with regard to that?
Oh, I would say that it would be the boathouse's number, because somebody is there most of the time.
Yeah, we have a manager that lives in the flat on site. So we have an appreciation of the local residents by also being a local resident. When the premises are open, which is presumably when these noise complaints are referring to, there is always a manager on site that is available to speak with anybody at any given point in time, either face to face or over the phone.
Okay, thank you. I think that the specifics were that it's all very well having your boathouse number, but your staff will obviously be busy serving your customers. It was to have a one-stop shop number, so the individual at any time could say, look, I'm very upset about the noise, and you would be able to react accordingly. It wasn't so much just contacting the premise and saying, well, yeah, we'll have a look at that. You know, it was to do it contemporaneously. So perhaps you could think about that. And the other matter was, and I put this also forward with regard to Councillor Johnson and Councillor Hadley, if they may feel this is appropriate. I just feel it's appropriate to ask you if you would consider reducing your off sales hours, as you put forward, to 9 o'clock. As you've told us quite extensively that you very rarely use it past that. And there may be occasions that you would wish to go past that, but it may be that you might use a TENS application if you would have some specific special event. It was just for consideration. Mrs. Graham, if you would like to consider that, perhaps have a conversation with your client to see if that were possible. It's just to mitigate some of the concerns by the local residents with regard to emanations that are coming from the premise with regard to off sales application. Thank you.
Thank you,
Your thoughts? Yes. Thank you. Okay, then. So we move to, it may be that you would like to consider that with your clients. It may be that when you have opportunity for summary, you'd be able to cover that point. And also the point with regard to the access telephone number for contemporaneous response. Thank you very much. So we will now have all parties got opportunity. Have I asked everybody? I did ask you, Sarah, didn't I? Yes, I did. So all parties have now got the opportunity to sum up, and it's the party who spoke first to go last. And sadly, we've lost Mrs. King, so we won't be able to ask her first. So it's Mr. Dwyer. Mr. Dwyer, it's your opportunity to sum up on your summation, please. Thank you. You with us, Mr. Dwyer?
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chairman. So in summation, I don't believe that Quants is the right place for off sales. I think the strength of feeling you've seen and heard. With Madam Councillor, Madam Chairman, you made a comment about potential change to the condition. Would you allow me to make a comment on that I think is highly relevant?
Yes, if you so wish.
You made the comment that the licensee might consider changing the timing. Can I add to that and say that the provision of alcohol at a temporary event is a very significant income stream for events, to the point where it's probably 50% or more of the income for not-for-profit events. In other words, it's the sale of alcohol at temporary events that funds the event. Would the licensee consider not having off sales at key events like Stomping on the Quants and the food festival, etc.?
Okay, well, it's out there, so that's a matter for their consideration. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. If you'd like to continue with your summation.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dwyer. Okay, so now we move to, we don't have Mrs. Dowling. So, Mr. Lucas, your opportunity to summarise. Thank you.
Chairman, apologies, I've removed my jacket, much like my friend. It's
you're all, if anybody wants, it's boiling hot. I've got my little pretty print t-shirt on. In fact, I've got a t-shirt on, which is very naughty. So please feel free if you want to take ties off. But please hold it at ties, no shirts. Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
So, Madam Chairman, I've made the points. You've heard here, this is probably a situation and a case where you have, if you like, the fervour and the actual strength of resident objections rather than the responsible authority objecting here. I ask you kindly, please, not to dismiss those objections, but indeed to attach the weight necessary that you see the objectors making, and indeed taking the time out of their day to come before you today and actually make those submissions in the strongest of terms. That being said, I'm here to represent the Town Council and indeed its resolution. So I kindly point you towards the concerns about litter and indeed the antisocial behaviour that my members say will happen at the Quants. Now, respectfully, I would add that the Town Council and the Town Councillors have strong local knowledge, indeed coming from Christchurch Borough Council following local government reorganisation. So I would respectfully suggest that those Town Councillors are perhaps, and I choose my words wisely here, in a better position to understand the sentiment and indeed the strength of the local voice against off-sales at this location. Now, I'm mindful that you have all of the evidence before you. You've given a fair hearing, respectfully, which I'm grateful for. It's been both fair and reasonable. But I urge you, please, to look at the guidance, the Section 182 guidance at paragraph 1.5, and indeed the lacunas in your own statement of licensing policy, which do not address litter. And I ask you here to look at, one, perhaps reducing the hours that has been put out there, as one of the phrases has been suggested, or indeed to look at strong conditions so that this site has the necessary regulatory control, given perhaps the arguable overlap with events on the Quamps. Secondly, the actual use of the site up to a permissible 11 PM, which is on the table before you, in an outside open space. And finally, to also look at the issues concerned. Madam Chairman, those are my submissions, unless you have any further help.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corton. All noted. Councillor Corton, your opportunity to sum up, please. Thank you.
Chairman, we appear to have lost Councillor Coulter from the call.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. I think she's quite open. I think we've got a good gist of where Councillor Corton's coming from, and as she's part of the Town Council, Mr. Lucas has very much just spoken, I think, fully on her behalf. So we can be satisfied there that her points have been well made. So we now move to Mrs. Graham, your opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's no doubt that last year was a unique scenario in terms of the need for people generally to get outside and enjoy a green space and vistas wherever they were. People were desperate to socialise when outdoors was the only place that they were permitted to go, and as such, there was obviously increased activity all over the country, and the Quamps suffered as much as everywhere else in terms of the quantum of people and the wish to, dare I say, let their hair down when restrictions had curbed their activities to such an extent. But obviously, this was not the norm in terms of looking at complaints last year, and hopefully we are soon back to normal or relative normality, where this will be a distant memory rather than an issue that continues. And secondly, I would ask you all to appreciate that not all the complaints that have been raised today can be left at the door of the boathouse. He's not the only takeaway in the area, and also there was much clearly from the litter collected that indicated people were bringing purchases from all around the High Street area. The Quamps are indeed intended to be an outdoor space for everyone to enjoy for a variety of activities, including picnicking, sports games and the like. And from Mr. Dwyer's comments, when they have a major event, alcohol is 50% of the profit for these events. So it's clear that alcohol generally is something that people would look for when they're coming to an event such as the major events on the Quamps. But I would ask you to look from a licensing perspective within the licensing objectives to the following points, if I may direct you to them, please. There have been no police representations received at all, and no doubt that is reassuring from the perspective of any antisocial behaviour issues that are alleged in connection with the premises. And there have been no objections or representations from any responsible authority. And indeed, one would have expected if there were issues over noise or unacceptable behaviours, shall I say, in the area, that the responsible authorities would have been the first to put their hat in the ring. In short, my client attracts a decent format of clientele. He doesn't want to upset any of the neighbours or any of the issues in the area, but he is an experienced operator. He's been there now since 1998, and he is as well versed as, indeed, dare I say, I am, as the local councillors, in terms of what the local community want and what his local customers demand of him. And I think we're all fortunate in having an operator that has been there with longevity. He's operated as a licensee, and I'm talking about Mr. Kim Slater here. He's had his own license for 50 years in the Christchurch area and operated a number of premises. So he's well versed in the management of licensed premises, what's expected of him, and his responsibilities. And I think we should be assured, because of that, that he is a local person who knows the local community and knows what is needed. It would be obviously different, and I could probably understand complaints if it was a high street pub company who suddenly took over the premises without those local connections that have been fostered over many, many years. I'm also conscious that to some extent reassured of the PSPO that is on the quants, in the sense that that gives more power, shall I say, to ensure that those who want to use the quants to enjoy a drink of alcohol with food from my client's premises, and I only speak from my client's premises, have the ability to do that at the same time as feeling safe from antisocial behaviour that would otherwise perhaps occur if that PSPO wasn't in place. And that is actually reassuring for the boathouse, in the sense that their clientele probably would not be too happy and would not frequent the premises as much if there was that antisocial behaviour and feeling of unhappiness and vulnerability at a site on the quants if there was too much drinking and revelry being carried on. Your town clerk, Mr. Lucas, quite rightly pointed out there should be community involvement in the procedures, and we appreciate that, because it's only by getting to know what issues are that we can indeed assist from our angle as a respective operator in the area concerned. And I have to say that in terms of the community involvement, I'd just like to touch on Councillor Hadley's point as to events on the quants. Obviously, and I've experienced this myself, events on the quants do bring in large amounts of people, incredibly large amounts of people to the area. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but I say this for the benefit of those in the community who are not happy with occurrences during that period, that there is a summer policing policy in situ at the moment. There is the police engagement, which is pretty close with the boathouse when any event is on the quants, because the police ask for certain things which the boathouse cooperate with pleasure during that period. It's appreciated by all concerned that at those times it's a special time for the quants, and people have to be extra vigilant and cooperative. And in that connection, I think I just would like to reassure everyone concerned that on those times there is increased and enhanced supervision, cooperation with the police, and whatever the police ask for, the boathouse assist with and supervise. So please be assured that there are extra facilities there to assist at those times. In terms of litter, you've heard perhaps Mr. Lucas's suggestion that litter is itemised from our premises, but the fact is that all litter is collected from the staff, and it is staff, not any agency, at the boathouse. You've heard from Mr. Slater that the litter is collected in the morning and in the evening and at ad hoc times during the day if the staff see that there is litter left here and there. And I would ask you to be reassured in that connection that this operator is a responsible local person who wants the best for the area, as do all the people who've made representations. And it is hoped that they can all work together in this respect. Just touching on your suggestions, I have had a suggestion that perhaps you would kindly consider a cut-off point for off sales, just so that we do have some flexibility of 10 p.m, which is the same hour as all events on the Quants cease, which probably would add to clarification across the board with anything that's happening in that area. And as to your suggestion, which is common, to have a telephone number for any complaints, then that is accepted, albeit that I can't give you the actual number at this point in time.
Okay, so Mrs. Graham, whilst we touch on that, I'm sorry to cut you through your summation. Extremely grateful for those offers on the table. There was one which I just omitted to raise, which I should have, which emanated from Mr. Dwyer's point, and that is the dot on the environmentally friendly receptacles that you use. Is there a possibility that some form of ID could be popped on these so that it can be ascertained if those receptacles from the boathouse or not? That again is a community function. It may be that it's too costly, but it was just something to put to you whether that were a feasibility. Thank you.
I think, Madam Chair, it may add to the cost. But I would just, and obviously the customer ends up funding that cost at the end of the day. But I think also, Madam Chairman, that if all the litter is collected, then I can't really see the point of isolating separate issues as to where the litters come from, because my clients don't complain about any litter they collect, they just pick everyone's up. So I'm just not sure we'd achieve anything except to add the cost of that to the customer's purchases.
Thank you very much. I just felt it was necessary to raise that because it had been put forward by one of our objectors as a concern. Thank you for your response. So are you completing your summation or are you just wanting to wrap up now?
I think I've probably covered every point. I'll just check with Mr. Slater.
I'm going to ask Mr. Slater and Mr. Slater if they have any further points, or if they'd just like to say anything further. We're happy to hear.
I think everything has been covered, so I don't want to waste everyone's time rehashing over every detail here. All I would say is, as I said before, we are part of this community too. We are looking to work with them, and after this I will actually be looking to make contact with Mr. Lucas himself to discuss how we can better work together on keeping that area of the Quants mutually beneficial, clean and tidy. But yeah, every point so far I think has been suitably covered.
Thank you. I'm sure that Mr. Lucas will be extremely grateful for that contact. That's extremely kind of you to put that on the table. So that said, we then move finally, and by no means least, Mrs. Rogers-Sarah, do you have anything to add or any summary, or are you content?
No, I'm content. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. So just before we move on then to conclude the meeting, I'd just like to be assured that everybody feels they've had the appropriate time to put forward their points, that they've been listened to, that we've done everything we possibly can to debate them within the 4 licensing objectives, which is what we are here to uphold. And unless anybody has something burning which we've missed, I would like now to move on to conclude the hearing. So I'll just wait for any raised hands. Oh, that's good. I'm pleased that that is the case, and I'm grateful to my subcommittee members for assisting me in that, and of course my officers. So I will now conclude the hearing. At the end of this meeting, the subcommittee will adjourn in private with our legal advisor and our clerk to deliberate. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is of course today. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I'll ask our legal advisor, Mrs. Cole, if she'd kindly explain the right of appeal, please. Thank you.
Yes, there will be a right of appeal to the decision that is made today. That appeal will be made to Dorset Magistrates Court and will have to be made within 21 days of formal notification of the decision.
Right. Again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I draw the meeting to a conclusion, and the committee will now adjourn and deliberate on the decision, and you shall hear it in due course.